Great. Thank you very much, everyone, for being with us. This is the final conference of GENEsYs, a project on youth and public spaces in East Asia, based at the Université Libre de Bruxelles, or ULB, in Brussels, Belgium. This event is live streamed on YouTube and Facebook, and at the end of each panel, audiences through Facebook and YouTube will be able to ask questions via the chats. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to Xavier Lufin, Dean of the Faculty of Letters, Translation and Communication at ULB. Thank you very much for being with us, Xavier, this morning.
Thank you for inviting me. So, dear colleagues, on behalf of my faculty, it is my pleasure to open this new international conference about Asia taking place in our university. I am particularly pleased because it is one of the very first opportunities I have to open again an event in person and not virtually, or not totally virtually. After almost 1 year of virtual meetings, virtual courses, and virtual conferences. We are still in the middle of the road with colleagues on the campus, few colleagues on the campus, and many others following us through Zoom or Teams or Facebook and other means. Nevertheless, let us hope that starting from next semester, we will again attend conferences as we used to do 1 year ago in the past, or almost as we used to do. As you can see on the program, this conference deals with youth and public space in many different Asian countries, from China and Japan to Vietnam and Laos and many other countries of the area. This event comes after many others focusing on Asia during the last years. It shows that thanks to the dynamism and the efforts of some of our colleagues, I would name, of course, Vanessa Franville, who is with her team the main organizer of this conference, Thierry Kellner, Pierre Petit, and I should name many other colleagues, but anyway, thanks to them, our university has really gained a strong expertise on Asia in a rather short period of time. Of course, this expertise was already here in our university for decades, but during the last years, it has really been reinforced through conferences, exhibitions, important publications, and also through the creation of EAST, a very successful research center dedicated to Asia that was launched in 2016. And of course also through courageous and independent position statements regarding politics in Asia and its links with the academic work. I am really proud that our university is now counting among the important academic voices regarding politics, history, and culture in Asia, thanks to this wonderful team that I named a couple of minutes ago. So I thank all the participants who accepted to be here with us today and tomorrow, and I wish all of you a very challenging and stimulating conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xavier, and thank you for your support throughout these past 5 years. I would like now to give the floor to Aurélie Varel, Director of the French Academic Network for Asian Studies, also known as GENEsYs, of which ULB is an active member since 2016 or 17, I think. Is Aurélie with us?
Yes.
Hi.
Hello,
Aurélie,
Vanessa. Do you see me somewhere?
I don't see you, but I guess others
You don't
can
see me?
you.
Okay, that's great. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me for the inaugural session of this conference. It is my pleasure to talk to you today, Brussels people and people everywhere related to my wonderful colleagues of EAST Research Center in Brussels. As Vanessa introduced us, GENEsYs means the French Network for Asian Studies. It was created in 2013, sorry, by the French National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS. Currently, we bring together 25 universities and grandes écoles with a particular scientific interest in the humanities and social sciences regarding Asia. And we bring together more than 30 research centers. East is one of our 30 research centers. It is our only non-French research center, but it really does matter to us to go beyond the state or national borders and to take with us these wonderful partners. And I will bring back to it a bit further, a bit later. Just to introduce what is GENEsYs, we have three missions. We are here to foster the community of Asian studies that exist in the French-speaking Europe. Let's put it like this. It has in this part of Europe, we have a long-standing tradition of research on Asia and excellence in Asian studies, especially on China and Japan. It is important to support this community and to help it develop in a real and more active and strongly knit scientific community that can address also, and we've experienced it with many difficulties for more than 1 year now, a community that is able to engage with public demand and the larger audience and its questions and also ignorance about Asia. And we are here to support it. What do? We have a portal that posts more than 100 announcements about scientific activities about Asia, and you can log on to it, GIS réseauasie.org, and we uh, sorry, we disseminate. It's a bit early, you know. We disseminate calls for funding, calls for papers, announcements of scientific events such as this one. We also organize scientific events, and we have our own conference next week on 2nd and 3rd of June on care in Asia. And we have a newsletter that is sent monthly to more than 3,000 people. And we know, because now it's possible to track such things, and we know that we have 800 readers every month of our newsletter. Our second mission is to support international cooperation and visibility abroad. And for this also, ULB is very important for us because it helps us little French organization to look beyond borders that shouldn't matter to intellectuals and scientists. And our third mission is to provide a special support to young researchers, meaning master students, PhD students, and postdocs. And in this regard also, your conference today is extremely important to us, and it does matter. So this is about us. I would like to congratulate Vanessa Francheville and everybody at East for this very beautiful research program that you have, research project, sorry, that you have been conducting over the last few years. We had a glimpse of it when East organized the very last in-presence seminar of GENEsYs in fall 2019. You hosted our young researcher methodological seminar, and we had some glimpses of GENEsYs program at that point. I would like to congratulate you and thank you also for your mobilization for Asian studies, your dedication, especially to young researcher, and the amazing dynamic of activities that is conducted at EAST. That is definitely one of the most active research centers in our network. And it is amazing what you've been able to achieve at ULB since the creation of this center. So just to say a few things about today's conference, Youth and Public Spaces in East Asia. I think it matters a lot, especially in the light of what has happened to us over the last, let's say, 1 year and a half. 15 months is a very Europeocentric duration. Actually, this thing started a bit earlier in Asia. And as a geographer, I'm extremely happy to see a conference on public spaces. Thank you so much and have a nice conference.
Thank you very much, Aurélie. We decided to start early because we wanted our colleagues from East Asia to attend, and it's already afternoon for them. So thank you for joining us this morning. So allow me to briefly introduce myself and introduce the project and the team. So my name is Vanessa Franqueville. I'm a professor of China Studies at ULB, also director of ULB's Research Center on East Asia. You have heard the name EAST several times now. So since 2016, I coordinate a research project on youth and public spaces in East Asia that we called GENEsYs because we wanted to focus on the generation Y, meaning those who were born after the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. The main objectives were to understand how East Asian younger generations, and especially those who are called millennials, appropriate, shape, and are shaped by physical and virtual public spaces. So we focused on Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, as well as China and Japan. But we also had guests covering Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong from time to time. This project was supported by an advanced ARC, or a fund from the Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles for collective research initiatives. So what is GENEsYs? GENEsYs, well, it's a wonderful team, I have to say, of 15 people. I don't include myself. I'm not as impressive and dynamic as my colleagues. So we have doctoral, postdoctoral, and confirmed researchers on the team. You will hear most of them today and tomorrow. They will present some of their findings. So you will see that this is extremely stimulating. So I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of them. Some of them are here in this room, but most of them are actually spread across various continents. They have brilliantly contributed to the projects over the past 5 years. And I really want to thank them for their unwavering dedication to the project, for their commitment to be here today. You should know that many of our team members have left ULB last year or the previous year. Some had shorter contracts, some had longer contracts. But still, they committed to join today from France, from Denmark, from China, I'm really happy that they, even though they have already accomplished their mission somehow in the project, they still agreed to join us today. I also want to thank colleagues from all around the world who have joined GENEsYs along the way, who have contributed to books, to special issues, other outcomes. Some of them are here today, and they made this research project really international, with connections to Japan, the Netherlands, the UK, the US, France, Vietnam, Germany, and many other countries across the world. GENEsYs, this is also a team of administrative staff, of course, without whom the project would have been simply impossible. So I want to thank the Maison des Sciences Humaines, to which East is attached, especially Maite Boscaerts, Vincent Chapeau, Cécile van der Pelen. But I also want to highlight the important work of other staff from the LAMC, for instance, Geneviève Corbizier, from the Faculty of Letters, Translation and Communication. I'm thinking of Marie-France Brachot, who did our logo, GENEsYs logo. And the whole team of the faculty, of course, they have all been crucial supports in the past 5 years. Of course, I also thank the Institute of European Studies because they have welcomed our conferences quite often, and this one as well. Thank you to Angeli Marilla, who is not with us today, but she might follow online. She's a doctoral fellow at LAMC, and she's a brilliant designer, and she's the one who made those gorgeous posters for the conference today and for exhibition. Well, GENEsYs, that's also a long list of books, special issues, book chapters, articles, and so on and so forth. You can actually find a list of all our outcomes on this stunning website that we owe to Virginie Arantes. Thank you very much, Virginie, for your commitment to make this website extremely well designed, attractive, informative, and easy to use at the same time. So I invite all of you to go and check out this website, genesys.ulb.be. Go have a look, it's brilliant. And thank you, Virginie, again for your talent, for your patience, and for your persistence. On the same website, you will find a summary of each member's project in videos, and these videos were made, they are short videos, 5 or 7 minute videos. They were made and edited by the talented Pai Kai, whom I also thank for his patience and his kindness. And last but not least, our website hosts a virtual exhibition on youth and public spaces based on pictures taken on the field by our colleagues from the team and beyond the team. And this exhibition was luminously put together by Lisa Richaud and Van Minh Nguyen, whom I can't thank enough for their work. It's simply beautiful. It's also illuminating. It's way beyond the usual academic outcome. And for those of you who are in Brussels, I can only recommend visiting the physical exhibition because we have both a virtual exhibition, which is available at all time, but we also have a physical exhibition on Solbosch campus, H building. And this was made possible with the help of the International Relations Office, which I thank for their diligence on this project. Let me also thank the crew, film crew today from the Arbra Film, who is making this live stream possible. Thank you very much, Frédéric Pognard, for arranging this, as well as so many other things. I can't list all of them. Frédéric Pognard has actively contributed to GENEsYs project throughout the past 5 years. Thank you very much. Of course, Professor Lufin and Professor Varel, who you have heard earlier, have been extremely supportive of the project, so I'm also happy that they accepted to join today. Thank you. And I don't want to take too long, so here is the program for the rest of the day. So I will launch the first panel on youth cultures and collective spaces. It's chaired by Flora Lisha. Thank you, Flora, for joining us today. Each speaker, we have about 15 minutes. Then our colleague from KU Leuven, Valeria Zanier, thank you for being with us. We'll open the discussion and then we will take time for Q&A. Once again, on Facebook and YouTube chats, you can ask questions from the audience. We will take questions from the room, of course, as well, as this is a hybrid conference. Then we will open the second panel in French this time. Sorry for non-French speakers. This will be a short panel with 2 panelists. And of course, there will be 2 more panels tomorrow from 9 a.m. Belgian time. So our chair for the next panel, we are a little bit early, I realize, is Flora Lisha. So if you give us a few seconds just to move around so that I can invite Flora Lisha to join us, as well as Lisa Richaud, who are both on the next panel. This will give you a 3-minute break. I also want to thank Xavier Lufin again for being with us and for joining us on this rainy day. And he's going again to brave the rain now, back to the faculty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oui, du coup.
Est-ce que si je montre le petit truc, ça va se voir ou pas? Je peux montrer aux gens.
Ah, sur l'écran,
Ouais,
c'est chaud, hein. J'ai déjà essayé, ça marche. Everyone in the audience, you have 2-3 minutes to take a coffee, take some fresh air. Ah, ok, d'accord.
Je peux commencer? Hello everybody, I'm Flora Lisha. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at EAST, and I will be chair for the first session, Youth, Cultures and Collective Spaces in China. So before giving the floor to the first speaker, I just wanted to tell you that you can ask questions during the presentations, whether on Facebook or on YouTube. We would prefer on YouTube channel, but if you want to write your questions on Facebook, it is possible as well. And for the participants, we will ask you to raise your hands and ask your questions on Zoom. So I first give the floor now to Vanessa Franville from East at ULB.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's me again. Sorry. So now I'm going to speak as the co-editor of an edited volume, of which you should be able to see the picture. This is a volume on China's youth, cultures, and collective spaces. This is the first volume of a Routledge collection that is edited by Frédéric Pognat and myself. The book was put together by Gwenaëlle Gaffric, who is here with us online from Lyon, and myself. It gathers 14 chapters, including an introduction and a conclusive chapter by Lisa Richaud, who is here with us in the room today. So today you will listen to some of the book contributors. So rather than going through each chapter, I will briefly highlight some of the main concepts and ideas of the book. So what we wanted to do was to contribute to a growing academic literature on youth in China, more specifically on youth cultures. We thought that we were convinced actually that these youth cultures were excellent windows on Chinese contemporary society. So we focus mainly on the PRC, the People's Republic of China. What we wanted to do is to take maybe a different angle. We hope to move away from temporal markers, temporal approaches, as the main focus. When we usually speak of youth, we think of time, but we were more interested in understanding the special dimensions of youth cultures in the case of the PRC. We wanted to take spaces not just as settings or containers, but rather as active agents, actors, if you want, in the formation of youth cultures. So our premise was that youth cultures in the 21st century China are profoundly shaped by the spaces in which they are produced, they are shared, and they are consumed. So our chapters focused on the Chinese millennials. So as I mentioned earlier, those who were born after the 80s, in the 90s, and the early 2000s. In Chinese, they're often called 80后, 90后, 00后. But we made clear that youth was not one, but many. So we tried to cover, as much as possible, different cohorts of youth, from rural migrants to urban elites, sexual ethnic minorities, socially marginalized youth, but also more mainstream youth, and so on and so forth. So the various contributions of the book made very clear that as a result of a significant diversity among younger generations in China, Chinese youth cultures were also multifaceted in terms of content, of forms of expressions, and spaces of creation and display and consumption. So as a result, youth cultural spaces came in many forms throughout the book. Some spaces are commercial spaces like shopping malls, leisure parks, TV shows. Some other spaces are public, like squares, streets, parks. Some spaces are virtual, like blogs, online diaries, chats, all sorts of social networks. And other spaces, again, can be mobile spaces, like motorcycle or mobile film festivals in vans, for instance, in the center of Beijing. So most of these spaces are highly fluctuating. They are unfixed. They adapt to new economic, political, social conditions. And the young cultural producers and consumers that we looked at, they constantly navigate between the official and the non-official, the formal and the informal, the local and the global. So it's a process of permanent change and permanent readaptation to new conditions. And that explains why not all youth cultures in China are countercultures or subcultures, but I will come back to it in a moment. Also of importance is that youth cultures are not limited to concrete, tangible productions. So it's not just about producing or consuming songs or byproducts from a cosplay conventions and so on. It's also about practices in everyday life. So for instance, what constitutes culture among young Chinese can be simply roaming around on motorcycle, playing drinking games, hanging out in karaoke or in a cosplay convention center, or simply throwing subtitles on a video on public online platforms. Another important aspect that was highlighted in many chapters throughout the book is that youth cultures are also about interactions and sociality. So whether it's cosplay, whether it's barrage subtitling, whether it's music, concerts, science fiction, museums or film festivals, any form of youth culture is a form of engagement with others. And they are attempts to bridge meaning between the individual and the collective. And that's the reason why we chose the term collective for collective spaces rather than public spaces, because we wanted to underline the forms of association that take place through youth cultures and through these spaces, which sometimes are public, but sometimes are semi-private, sometimes are public with small fees, and so on and so forth. So there's a variety in terms of publicness that we covered, but we wanted to insist really on the ways youth collectively appropriate, change, reinvent spaces of cultural production and consumption. And that's, we wanted to insist on the fact that the possibility to reinteract for these young people is just as important as the content that they produce and consume. I mentioned before that not all youth cultures are subcultures or countercultures. But that doesn't mean that younger generations in China are not able to produce engaged cultures. And several chapters in the book actually show that we should move away from perceptions of passive, materialistic, individualist youth. And just the reverse, youth in fact demonstrates engagement in public spaces, whether it's offline, whether it's online. They manage to cope with censorship. They deploy creative strategies to circumvent all sorts of obstacles, may they be economic, political, or social. And they manage to sustain somehow, as I said, an unfixed and itinerant youth cultural production in many of these collective spaces we have identified. So they demonstrate somehow through culture, civic and social engagement. And that's one point that we also wanted to highlight in the book. So very briefly, the book is divided in 4 parts. The first part, I don't mention the introduction by GENEsYs, Gafrik and myself. Then we have the first part, which focuses on the production and consumption of mass culture in collective spaces such as shopping malls, leisure parks, squares, bars, entertaining districts, museum, and other so-called cool places for the young generations. Part 2 deals with sociability in the creation and consumption of culture among youth, whether in rural, urban, or virtual spaces. And we will have the opportunity to listen to Seiyo Nakajima today, who contributed to the book with a chapter on barrage subtitling in Chinese online platforms. Part 3 is about youth who place high value on civic engagements and who engage in some political debates in public spaces. And we are lucky to have Eric Florence with us today, who will tell us about his work on migrant museum in Beijing and other places in China. Part 4 looks at time travel, alternative history, online fiction, as well as the resurgence of activities that are perceived to embody Chinese traditional culture. So it's about traveling in time. And here we are extremely lucky to have actually 3 contributors with us. GENEsYs Gafrik is going to talk about his research on online literature and especially science fiction. And we'll also listen to Laura Vermeeren and Jeroen de Kleut about practices such as calligraphy among younger generations in China. And the concluding chapter will be presented by Lisa Richaud herself, who is here with us in the room. And she will open up new perspectives, very fresh perspectives on the book and on further research. So thank you very much for your attention. I invite you again to go on our website. There's a short video that's probably the longest video. Actually, it's about 7, 8, or 9 minutes maybe, in which Gwenaëlle Gafrique and myself present the book in details. So if you want to know more about the book, that's one option. And the second and best option is actually to purchase the book and to read it with your students if you are teaching, or with your colleagues, or for your own pleasure. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, for your presentation. Now we will listen to Seiyo Nakajima from Waseda University. Seiyo, you have 15 minutes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so I will just share my PowerPoint, and hold a second. So you can see my PowerPoint.
Yes.
Is it okay? All right, and okay, yeah. So I will start, and my name is Seiyo Nakajima, and the title of my presentation today is The Sociability of Millennials in Cyberspace, Comparative Analysis, Barrage Subtitling in Nico Nico Doga and Bilibili. So my work is kind of comparative, discussing Japan, China, the virtual space interaction. So hope it will be an interesting kind of comparative background within which many of the interesting chapters that follow my presentation will be positioned and examined further. And yeah, before starting my presentation, I again would like to thank Professor Vanessa Frambill of ULB East, and also other members of ULB community and beyond for inviting me into this very fascinating project and giving me my opportunity to present this paper today. And just one thing, and I prepared relatively detailed PowerPoint, but of course the time is only 15 minutes. So I will decided not to show many of the interesting videos and even visuals. So if you're interested, I will be happy to share my PowerPoint with you. So yeah, if you're interested, you can contact organizer or look for my email address, and I'll be happy to send you my details. So yeah, I will not show, unfortunately, in the interest of time, I will skip all the interesting videos. So mostly presentation will be textual. And so today I will just go through, a couple of things, a little bit of motivations. And then again, I will start with Japanese video sharing site, introduce this Nico Nico Doga a little bit, and then Chinese video sharing site, Bilibili, and then provide some tentative conclusions. And for empirical motivations, and as Vanessa also introduced, so there are increasing now emerging studies on youth and virtual public space in China, but many focus on content or what is communicated. And especially in my field, sociology, it is usually the political implication of the content. An example would be, again, I will not be able to go into the details, but yeah, this is a quote from a news website, and two women in Wuhan posted this video that said "Tinzhui Daocha," meaning the vehicle is backing up, so be careful. And this, of course, many people said was a covert criticism of China sliding backwards, and especially around that time, there was an abolishment of term limits for China's President Xi Jinping. So many people thought this just a simple video in SNS, Weibo, other SNS video sharing site, um, putting this video of vehicles backing up is a covert political criticism, political expression. And I wouldn't, of course, underestimate the power and also kind of importance of these kind of political message. But then what might be missed would be like a form of interaction. And I rely here on the German sociologist George Zimmel's concept of forms of association, which is relational. Hold a second. Yeah, relational structures of human interaction associations. So as the media scholar Marshall McLuhan mentioned, in communication, of course, medium, the message, content of the message is important, but we should also focus on the medium not just the message content of the communication. So he said the medium is the message, or he used this term, medium is the message. So focusing on how this interactional structure may influence the way people interact in the cyberspace. And I want to go over everything, but Zenmo, he presented this concept, formal sociology. So he argued sociology's distinct focus should be on forms and modes of interaction, I mean, in addition to content. And I will skip this quote. And here I want to provide, again, a little bit of broader background of my theoretical motivation. And now, because I'm also dealing with Japanese video sharing website as a kind of context within which Chinese video sharing site and practices will be uh, positioned. So Akihiro Kitada, Japanese sociologist, distinguished between what he calls sociality of order and sociality of connections, and in many ways very simple. So sociality order, as many people understand or maybe can guess, the purpose of interaction is to avoid misunderstanding and convey substantive meanings, content correctly. And of course, this is important in communication, to convey what you want to say, meaning correctly. That's one part of communication. But he basically argued in youth interaction, in first in Japan, and also I would argue also in China, this sociality of connections, in which the purpose of interaction is a formal continuation of communication without necessarily aiming at conveying substantive meanings, would be very important. So my research would be focusing on the forms of communication, the especially not the content, but the format, forms, interaction, structured communication. And in the paper, I discuss many things, but this is the Japanese example of sociality of connections that is focused on connecting other people rather than conveying messages. And I will skip all the details, but for example, use of emoticons and stamps in youth communication. It is not that they want to really focus on communicating substantive meaning, but the conveyance of the fact that the sender uses elaborate emoticons and also rare stamps is equally or more important sometimes than the content of the message. And the other example, moedan, is a cute cross section, can be translated a cute cross section. And this is kind of strange, but in Japanese SNS and increasingly in China, this showing cross section of colorful fruit sandwiches, maybe ham, like lettuce, this beautiful cross section of food is becoming popular as a means of communication. And here, basically, the kind of the purpose of communication becomes proliferating and connecting with others by showing what seems like a beautiful sandwich, like a colorful fruit sandwich. And this doesn't really convey what they want to convey in terms of meaning, even like a political messages or some sort of evaluation. But the fact that they connect, this allows people to use to connect with each other is one of the important focus of discussion in today's SNS in Japan and also in China, I would argue. So, as a kind of these lengthy theoretical and empirical motivations as a background, I asked 3 questions. And first, how do millennials interact with each other in virtual public spaces of Nico Nico Doga and in Japan and also Bilibili through particularly the practice of barrage subtitling? And second, what are the similarities and differences between the forms of interaction between Nico Nico Doga, Japanese site, and also Chinese Bilibili? And third, a little bit more theoretical reflection. What implications do these case studies have on rethinking the concept of collective space and publicness? So these are the questions I ask. And again, I have to skip showing these videos. If you're interested, I will be happy to send you a link or PowerPoint. So I will skip this. And Nico Nico Doga, these are detailed, like when it is founded, by whom, like access numbers, the user structure of the users. So I will skip all these. And one particular phenomena I focus on in this paper is barrage, what is called barrage subtitling or comment in Nico Nico Doga's terminology, is coming from barrage in military strategy. So as all of you probably know, comments can be positioned anywhere on screen, top, bottom, middle, and flow move from right to the left, sometimes even covering up the entire screen. So the content is invisible and different colors, size, moving speed, and use of lots of internet slangs. And one practice I introduced in detail in this paper is what they call soramimi mishearing subtitling. And this is interesting. So when lyrics of a song, for example, sound like saying things that are different, unrelated from the original lyrics, but if you can come up with words and phrases that are similar in sound but different in meaning and put them as barrage subtitles, the communication continues without really engaging with the substantive meanings. So this is one kind of example of the sociality of connections I discussed in this chapter. And another, a couple more interesting features of barrage subtitling is what they call pseudo sync or non-sync live. So multiple comments accumulate and appear following the timeline of the video, not the realm timeline. So even if someone is posting these barrage subtitling alone, just one person, but because comments accumulate and plays together with this video, you feel like you are collectively viewing and reacting the video even if you are presenting and adding barrage subtitle alone. So that is also interesting feature of this communication. And also, like a Soramimi abounds in these barrage subtitle practices. So I would first argue Japanese video sharing sites, this barrage subtitling practice is focusing on sociality of connections, connecting for the sakes of connecting. And again, I actually go into more details on the Chinese case because this book volume itself, it talks about youth culture in China. So I, details like history of Bilibili, but I will skip this. And first, similarity with Nico Nico Doga. So again, comment lots of dammu, dammaku, and command function, and particular internet slangs in Chinese, which I will not be able to go into. So I, in the paper, I argue in many ways, this sociality of connections, connecting for the sake of connecting, is also prevalent in Chinese barrage subtitling in Bilibili. But what are the differences? And this is my provisional answer. But first, because this Nico Nico Do and the Bilibili comes from subcultural group of people who liked what they call ACG, anime game comics. So compared to Nico Nico Doga, which has a little more looser community, it seems a little more subcultural people gathering. And in order to post and become a member who can post, comment, you need to pass kind of elaborate quizzes to move up the levels of membership. So a little bit more subcultural group of people. And also simultaneous existence of barrage subtitling and ordinary subtitling translations, because again, not all videos, but because it started as kind of group of people who like Japanese anime, foreign, Korean pop music. So foreign language content are really prevalent in Bilibili. So they combine this, of course, translation of meaning, focusing on content with this communication for the sake of communication. And also there's, Suramimi practices in Chinese Bilibili. But because, in Japanese Nico Nico Doga, they do Suramimi practice kind of selectively, but maybe because the some of the videos posted in Bilibili is foreign language, kind of paradoxically, they can engage with foreign language without really understanding the meaning if you do Swamimi. So I noticed lots of Swamimi that do entire songs of Swamimi, basically kind of association game using the same sound, but no like a relation in terms of meaning. And of course, this is playing out in the language of Chinese. So I discussed that in detail in the paper. And also cultural adaptation hybridity. So in Japan, popular culture, there's a practice of what they call love umbrella. So basically in anime manga, they put the shape of umbrella and put people's names who might be in love relations. And of course, in when these Chinese audiences put various subtitling, they draw these love umbrella, but using this Chinese character of, Xuanxi, the double happiness character, as they do in traditional wedding. They put these characters of happiness, two characters that says happiness and, congratulate the love, relations of love. So again, cultural adaptations. And maybe just 2 minutes and I will end. And yeah, so the conclusion would be research question one, millennials, both, my argument would be both in China and Japan, we may be able to, say something interesting by focusing on the sociality of connections, connecting for the sake of connection. And also differences, similarity, definitely, Japanese video sharing sites, Chinese video sharing sites are not the same. So we need to explore why there are, different practices, how they use kind of no, maybe not tradition, but the cultural adaptation. This is also interesting. So, but need to explore more. And the last thing is, what implications do these case studies have on rethinking the concept of collective space and publicness? As again, in sociology, many people discuss these, when we talk about internet, video sharing, kind of divided dualistic view. So on one hand, if it's political, then you kind of praise because it's political opposition within the very constrained space. But on the other hand, if not political, they basically, we may, tend to say, okay, that's the only the entertainment, no political meaning. It's basically just having fun. So this kind of dualism, I would like to kind of critique. And again, I won't be able to read all these details, but again, I rely in the paper on this Gmail's concept of sociability. So basically, he says sociability is the art or play form of association related to the content and the purpose of the association in the same way as art is related to reality. So basic argument is it can, these sociability can occur only if more serious purpose of the individual kept out, so that an interaction is not of complete but of symbolic and equal personalities. And the manner which in a society groups form and break up, conversation spin itself out, deepens, loosens, cuts itself off purely according to impulse and opportunity. That is a miniature picture of the social ideal that men or women or other people might call freedom bondage. So again, many people may say, okay, I talked about social connections. Then, I mean, it's meaningless, just a play of word, no meaning. But I would say this fact that people can connect with each other in kind of equal footage, we need to really rethink the kind of political implication of collective spaces and publicness, not based on contents or some sort of overt criticism of the government, but on the idea of freedom of bondage. And yeah, that would be my at the end of my presentation. Okay, thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Seyo, for your presentation. So now I will give the floor to Laura Vermeren and Joren de Clot from the University of Amsterdam. You have 15 minutes.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself while I was sharing my screen. Okay. I assume this works. It's always a little bit strange online. So I will do the first part of the talk, and Laura will pick up after me. So welcome everybody, and thanks so much, Vanessa and others, for organizing this. It brings back very good memories of your projects, and I think we should just continue the project in some way or the other. Who are you? They ask in Soulmate. Please don't ask me such existential questions. I thought it was a kind of funny, we thought it was kind of funny fragment. So this is about, our talk is about youth in China and what we observe as the withdrawal of youth in China, the withdrawal actually from the high pressure that sort of caught our attention, how young people in China, I think we're all familiar with the super high pressure in terms of achievement, how they change actually and try to withdraw. You see it also in schooling systems actually. I recently talked to a Buddhist teacher who said they have now an alternative Buddhist schools in China where some parents put their children, even though they can't do the Gaokao, the exam that is meant, that is used, important as we all know to achieve something. So let me just bring you to, I know this is very touristy, Dali 2019, where I was. And I remembered it as a place for foreigners, the backpackers, but it turned out it's now very much a place for Chinese tourists. And the good thing then is that the Musli has been replaced by hot pot. But it really changed also quite a bit. So there I observed this what we call, yeah, the kind of Chinese hipsters. So that's the term we like to use. The kind of alternative lifestyle. You can see the aesthetics, the straw, the heads, the big heads, flowery uh, blue, denim blue. Uh, you see a lot people doing yoga along the lake. And this resonates with what we like to call kind of following Raymond Williams, a structure of feeling, among Chinese youth that resonates throughout China. And for example, it's also part of a cinematic culture. For example, the Hong Kong movie A Soulmate by Derek Tsang from 2019, a 2011 Giddens Go movie from Taiwan, You Are the Apple of My Eye, or Zhang Dalei's The Summer Is Gone, 2016, the black and white movie, which is beautiful, beautiful. Highly recommended. And we deliberately take here examples from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China because it's a very much a trans-Asian phenomenon. So it's crossing the borders. And actually, Taiwan and Japan play a very important role in the imagination of this kind of emerging Chinese hipster culture. Now, the two terms that we like to use here, the Weni Qingyan or the Xiao Qingxin, the little fresh youth or the cultured youth. These are two terms that are quite common circulating in China as well as in Hong Kong and Taiwan. So one, it's a trans-Asian phenomenon in which the imagination of Taiwan and Japan as places of purity, a simple life, a non-competitive life are very important. We also observe that it's a kind of vernacular creativity, and we will also show it's actually the politics of this kind of youth culture is a politics of withdrawal and calligraphy. And this kind of nostalgic return to an imagined past is also plays a very important part. And the calligraphy fever that has caught China is actually part, we think, of this emerging hipster culture. We like to read as part of this emerging hipster culture. So, like I said before, it's an let's say, an East Asian phenomenon, but of course, in different places with different articulations. And we now focus primarily on mainland China, but it will be interesting to see, for example, in Hong Kong, they played quite an important role in the movement and in different localities. So we did focus groups some time ago, and here you trace and you see what's very often in youth culture. Oh, nope, this went a bit too fast. That there is the difference between Xiao Jingxing and Wen Qingyan. Wenqing are supposed to be often the cultured ones, and Xiao Jingxing is more like the commercial. That's a bit is more superficial. So here what we actually see is a quite commonly observed narrative within subcultures actually that partly is deemed to be too commercial and others are always on the edge of being commercial. So this is a kind of familiar. But like Ting Ting explained to us, now it seems that everyone is a kind of self-centered, trying to accumulate capital and living an entertainment life. There's no unity. The whole atmosphere is making you feel so stressful. Now, and this kind of idea, this is why Raymond Williams comes in handy, like the structure of feeling unites this kind of hipster culture. Now, what kind of imaginaries? This is a very superficial kind of research, which I still like because of its images. So this is a Google search on these terms. And I think we're quite familiar, right? It's kind of Muji lifestyle. It's pure. It's like Roten. And there's a funny thing. So it's in a way a withdrawal from the world, but it's deeply embedded in commercialism, right? It's actually about consumption at the same time. These are the images you can come across. You see the hairstyle, photography, you read books, you wear curatorial black, right? And you go to vintage clothing shops. Or you read Murakami, you do low-mo photography, you wear skinny jeans, you buy very simple but very expensive clothes, you go to creative markets, you have handmade glasses, you surround yourself with books you don't quite understand, and you have this sort of, and you have these canvas bags. So many people, of course, also make fun. So this is also making fun of this kind of culture. And there's also all kinds of values attached to it, like in this cartoonish character. It's about quality of life. It's about traveling. It's about having lots of opinions. And the critique then often is, of course, they feel better than the rest of the world. But we, and that's, I think, our main point actually, we see it also as an interesting retreat from the highly competitive society that China has become. Now, if you Google Xiao Jingxin, then these are the images you get. And again, it's like the purity, it's like the flowers, it's like the simple life. And Sung Hui Lim, in a wonderful article about this phenomenon, says, however, for Williams, these feelings, the structure of feeling, however personal, small, articulate changes in feeling and consciousness are the social material. So this feeling actually does mean something, and seeing something as small and ephemeral as little freshness are of value because they embody experience of living a certain kind of being in the world. So it's it's an alternative reality they aspiring, and we do think it's important to take this serious. So again, images of Xiao Jingxin. Now, let me from Hong Kong conclude then with My Little Airport, because My Little Airport is a band from Hong Kong that's also always been very much part of this kind of Weniching, yeah, this kind of cultured youth movement, and I highly recommend you all to listen to them. They have also really funny songs. For example, Donald Song, Please Die. I can highly recommend that one to you. Let's move to Laura.
Yes, thank you, Jeroen. So I'm moving from Jeroen's account on try to conceptualize this hipster culture in China to a specific case study of calligraphy practiced by young people. And with young people, I mean around 18 to 30. In several spaces in Beijing and in digital spaces as well, in the shape of a calligraphy lifestyle blog. And I will try to add some answers to the overarching question of this conference. So on how public spaces shape East Asian youth identities by looking at how practicing calligraphy has become a way to create a sense of belonging and placemaking. And I will try to do this through the concept of fugu, or restoring antiquity, as I try to translate. So I wrote my PhD thesis, finished last year, on various forms of everyday creative practices of calligraphy. And one of the spaces where I spent, the PowerPoint's gone, Jeroen, I think.
Sorry,
So one of the spaces where I spent a lot of time researching were various small and bigger privately owned calligraphy education centers in Beijing. And these schools are becoming increasingly popular. And they're now mushrooming in the city centers and in the outskirts. And they vary in size and in approach. And it is quite difficult to estimate how many schools actually are established and how many people are actually following calligraphy classes. And one teacher I spoke to this, she said that within 1 kilometer radius from her own school, at least 30 small schools had popped up within the last 5 months. So it's difficult to validate, but it does serve as an indication of how popular calligraphy classes have become in Beijing. So many of the people who follow these classes, they're young people, and the reasons for doing so vary. So some are using calligraphy to get bonus points on the Gaokao score, similar to what Jeroen mentioned on the Gaokao. Some are forced by their parents, of course. But then there are those who in our interviews have expressed a desire to reconnect to something that they feel has been lost in modern times. So to feel part of an educated class, and then specifically a Chinese educated class. I think we can go to the next slide, Jeroen. And calligraphy, which is so often seen as the essence of Chinese culture or conceptualized as the essence, then becomes a means to reconnect to what it means to be Chinese and to see oneself as part of a long lineage of cultured literary people. Those people who once knew how to live life, slow, pure, simple. And of course, because of the association of written characters with moral character, this contemporary self writes itself quite easily into a historical and Chinese continued past by reproducing the same gestures. So one example I want to show you is Jia, who I met in Beijing. She has started a small calligraphy school with her husband. I think you can go to the next slide. You see it on here on the right side. So she started this small calligraphy school with her husband. And in the school, they ask their students to wear a traditional scholarly dress over their regular clothes before entering the classroom. And in doing so, they literally step from an inferior present into an imagined past. So the teachers also wear traditional clothes without seams, and they try to decorate the studio as accurately as possible in Ming style. And this, Jia, the owner, she asserts, is all part of restoring antiquity. So she mentions fugu. And I quote here, I have it on the slide, I quote her here. She says, "The clothes I'm wearing, everything is all a bit fugu. And it shows that I am not like modern people. So we people that like calligraphy, we like old objects. We like buying ancient inkstones, we like old paper, we like filling with a piece of wood instead of with a mobile phone. And I think this type of fugu, she says, is a nostalgia for traditional Chinese culture. I think everybody in China has this complex, this fugu. But we who like calligraphy, we definitely have this complex. So fugu, or restoring antiquity, is now often used in terms of housing or clothing style in the way that retro is employed in English. But this philosophy dates back to the Sui in the early Tang and gained momentum in the Northern Song, and is built around the idea, the Confucianist idea, that mishaps in the present can be overcome through restoring an ideal past. So how do you restore this ideal past? It is done through learning and through collecting ancient objects. So it's not just a melancholic longing for a romanticized past, but actually an actual effort to reconstruct this past. And here we link this to Svetlana Boym's idea of restorative nostalgia, which does not really think of itself as nostalgia, but rather as truth and tradition. So by wearing ancient clothes, by collecting ancient objects, and by practicing the ancient art of calligraphy, a fragment of that past is preserved and brought to the present to improve that present. I think we have some time for the last case study. Good hour, yeah. So I want to briefly mention that the space where calligraphy is practiced, the spaces, is practiced and created and consumed and taught, is now also very often a digital space, which we see not separate from our daily lives, but is part of the everyday in which quotidian practices occur. And I take the popular online blog of young calligrapher Lin Xi, you see here on the left and in the middle, as an example. And she paints this, well, as Jeroen sort of said, a hipster pastel-colored, fresh image of calligraphy. So her blog features advice on how to practice calligraphy, online calligraphy lessons, which are criticized for being super expensive. They're around 150 euros an hour. Interviews with mostly female calligraphy practitioners, personal stories on health, well-being, innocent content such as drawings, recipes, images of cats, plants, flowers. And the introduction, I think you can go to the next slide, Jeroen. The introduction to her class says, we advocate writing calligraphy as a way of life. We regard the aesthetics of our Chinese traditional scholars, our soil. We try to analyze and relate to the ancients. Our learning will nurture us, strengthen our character, patience, and enjoyment through traditional wisdom. We let the beauty of calligraphy support our lives and nourish us for an unrestrained life. So Jeroen just attempted to sketch an image of what could be constitutive of a Chinese hipster, someone with a desire to retreat from modernity and high capitalism, to move back, to be creative, if possible, outside of the creativity dispositive as propagated by both state and creative industries, and instead opt for a becoming more innocent, more pure, and more authentic. What calligraphy does here, we contend, is add a Chineseness to this description. So calligraphy not only means a physical reconnecting with the past through the movements of the brush, but through also the idea of fugu as a way to correct the wrongs of the present by restoring and reenacting a past. So calligraphy then we see as part of a politics of withdrawal that is paradoxically intertwined with a careful and tasteful consumption. I have a final slide, which is oh, no, this is not the final slide. This is one slide. I took this from her blog as well, just to show, she says, within this big world, this big bad world, we create a small world for ourselves. And her blog is called Small World. So she tries to really create a perfect little micro cosmos, let's say. This is the final slide that I wanted to share with you, just to show that finding refuge in letters, in poetry, is not something Asian necessarily or something new. And there's a revival going on also on Instagram here in the West. Of Emily Dickinson's poetry. And I'd like to share this poem as sort of finding solace and refuge in words and in poetry, or in a book, as she says. Yeah, I think this was it for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
From the University Jean Moulin Lyon 3. Gwenaël, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hello everyone. I'm happy to be with you today to give a little feedback of my research carried out as part of the GENEsYs project. Actually, my original field of study is literary studies, and even if I work mainly on contemporary literature, Sinophone literatures, I was before starting this project on cyber literature exclusively interested in the traditional formats, so the traditional model of literature. So it was something new for me to work on digital web literature and so on. So as for the GENEsYs project, I submitted postdoctoral research projects, which led me to take an interest in the renewal of the literary field, carried today by a large majority of young creators and young readers in the public space in China. Also, of course, we discuss a lot about the idea of cyberspace as a public space, especially in the Chinese context. And one of the important arguments during the selection of this topic for me was the sociological and literary twofold dimensions of cyber literature, which must be understood as both a new artistic, oh, sorry, full screen for my slide. Yeah, of course. Is it better now? Maybe. Okay. So yeah, I was saying that cyber literature must be understood as both a new artistic format and also as a cultural industry. So just for information, there are around now 500 million readers of cyber literature in China. So it's quite a lot. So what led me to this project was above all a curiosity for these new literary formats, which I planned at the beginning to observe through the lenses of the social cultural practices of Chinese youth and of their new ways of writing and consuming literature. But as I will discuss later, I've changed, or at least reoriented, my approach over the course of my research by focusing on how the model of these cyber literature platforms, you have an example here, built on the basis of an individual consumption, can also generate unexpected and eventually subversive collective spaces and practices. So studying cyber literature, but I think that it is true for anyone working in cyberspace studies, perhaps especially in China, has generated a lot of challenges for me, both theoretical and methodological. As theoretical, first, because the traditional theories of literature are often inapplicable to analyze these cybertexts, as well as their context of production and reading. Cyber literature undermines the primacy of the aesthetic, the beautiful, the original, and even the politically incorrect, which are usually the conditions for the canonization of a literary work. Actually, cyber literature series or works are generally consensual, standardized, repetitive, and respond to market expectations rather than a search for literary quality or uniqueness. So theoretically, all the major agents of literature are also upset. The writer, the reader, the text. I won't have time to develop more today, but uh, it's indeed the foundations of literary theory which are shaken by this new format. For a methodological point of view, I also encountered quite a lot of challenges, which are shared, I think, by all those whose research field is also cyberspace, but also specific to the study of cyber literature. First, there was this uncertainty as to the disciplinary framework of such a study. Did I need to make a sociological inventory and analysis of a cultural phenomenon? Or on the contrary, to dwell on the specifics of one or several particular literary works? The second methodological pitfall is the vertiginous nature of the corpus, of the body of work, As you can maybe see here, there are hundreds of thousands of celebratory works that can be found on this kind of platform. And the canonization, as I said, of these works is not based on the innovative character of the text, but on its commercial success. So it's not easy to find a text that could be at the same time illustrative of a social cultural phenomenon and also literary interesting enough so as not to reduce literature to a simple sociological datum. So to reduce the field of investigation, I therefore decided to pre-select a literary genre, which was in some way an epistemological facility because it is often by genre, literary genre, one lay that works are classified on cyber literature platforms. So here in the slides, you have different works, hundreds of thousands of works, but classified by genre and subgenre. So I have chosen to observe particularly the genre of time travel, 穿越 in Chinese. Skip. Okay. Um, that is very fashionable actually right now in China, in the Chinese cyber literature world. And by extension, also the genre of alternative history fiction, 架空历史小说 in Chinese, which is often a branch of time travel literature in China. So the recurring motif of works related to this genre is the following. So one or more characters, most of the time contemporary characters, travel in the past, never in the future, and most of the time in the Chinese past and at a prosperous time. And they change then the course of history as we know it. So the series I've worked on is Lingao Qiming, that chronicles the journey of contemporary characters to the Ming Dynasty in China, where they found a new political and military power modeled on the Imperial Roman Senate. So the whole series tells in detail how these time travelers raise an army, shape their economic and social systems, create alliances, fight enemies, or build political theories. The story describes the developments of a new industrial power and its gradual evolution towards an imperialist power. So in the foreword of the series on Qidian, so on the cyber literature platform, this one, 吹牛者, the other, introduced the series as belonging to a subgenre, the collective time traveling fiction, 团川小说 in Chinese. Because there are indeed no real main characters in Lingao Qiming. 吹牛者 insists on the multiple motivations of the time travelers. Some want to escape their gloomy reality. Others want to create a utopian kingdom or hope to find a new lover. Others are probably passionate about history. Other are nationalistic and somehow want to stop the influence of the Manchu invasion. But all agree in seeking the most efficient system. What is also interesting in the series, but that would deserve a study in itself, is the way the series is playing also with history of Maoism and the Maoist iconography, as you can see in the slide, because it's a collective project, a collective movement to build a utopian kingdom. And as for the fan, I mean, extended universe about the series, you have a lot of these kind of pictures that play with the Maoist iconography at the same time. So the collective dimension of Lingao Qiming goes far beyond the narrative itself, the story itself, and also spreads more widely in cyberspace via cyber literature platforms, forums, and through collaborative encyclopedias. The series also finds its genesis itself at the beginning of the series in discussions on a forum. And Cui Niuzhe, one of the contributors at that time, only compiled, according to him, the discussions of the forum users into a work as coherent as possible. So, Lingao Qiming series. And it's true that the characters of the series are, for the vast majority of them, forum users or other trial writers and readers that participated to the initial discussion or done it afterwards. So the series has consequently a strong metafictional dimension, which also makes it, and it was interesting for me, an object of study which is particularly revealing of the codes, of the standards of the triangular, the time travel fiction genre. And as the proof for our book that Vanessa introduced earlier were in press, I learned that the series was being withdrawn from TDN platform for different reasons, but which amounted to an accusation of historical nihilism. And you have an article by a Hong Kong journal about the withdrawal of the series. So it appeared after I wrote this chapter about Lingao Qiming for the book. Actually, Chidian's censorship, it's now actually back in Chidian since a few months, but with a number of modifications that have not yet succeeded in identifying as a whole. I have to put a lot work on it, what has changed after the, the coming back of the series. So it responds to a more general call, which these criteria are set by the National Radio and Television Administration, even if it's a novel, actually. So it is true that theoretically, a genre such as alternative history fiction is the opposite of Marxist doctrine of historical materialism, according to which, as you probably know, the engine of history, what makes history, is not the action of individuals, but the evolution of the productive forces. For radical history materialism, history follows a common thread that is impossible to get rid of, and that makes every historical event almost inevitable. But actually, that's precisely what a series like Lingao Qiming does. It's an extremely rigorous report on industrial revolution. It's a kind of hard alternative history fiction, if I can borrow this adjective from that is used with science fiction. This is a series with a materialist conception of history, as it shows the impact of the evolution of the means of production on individuals and history. But still, it presents a deviation from official history that eventually leads to a big turn in the national official narrative. This is the whole paradox in triangular fiction in China today. Even the most nationalistic and zealous alternative history novels that imagined, for instance, that Japan did not win the Sino-Japanese War, that China became the big power during the 1980, the 19th century, sorry, is by nature still questioning the official historiography. So it denies the uniqueness of history by suggesting the possibility of alternative choices that could have been made during history, and by questioning the logic of a single community of national destiny. So it's actually it's hard to state clearly to what extent a work like Lingao Qiming's threat to public order, but its salvation lies perhaps less in its story, which is actually quite classic, even sometimes conservative, but in its collective dimension. That's what I try to show during my research in the chapter of the book. In its ability to mobilize a group or individuals to rewrite history and to hijack the sacrosanct national story. Beyond the conception model, that is the one of the cyber literature platforms, because it's actually cultural consumption, imagination still as a weapon um, can exist, even in a very industrial sphere like cyberspace. So this is what I maybe have learned during this journey into Chinese cyber literature. And that was quite interesting, even if as a literary scholar, sometimes we can be frustrating by the, I would say, the limits in terms of literary quality or literary originality, but that still make imagination as something that can be politically and artistically subversive and interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwenaël. Now we will listen to Eric Florence from the University of Liège. Eric Florence, you have 15 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Just sharing my screen now. Okay, so I guess you can see my screen. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'll just turn to full screen then. Okay. All right. Yeah, thank you very much for the to the organizers for this final conference, and it's been a real pleasure to take part to the events, the various events, and of course the great book that was published. And congratulations for the work of editing and giving the coherence to this book. That's been a real pleasure to be part of this. So I will, in these 15 minutes, try to, maybe start from a number of theoretical considerations that I've structured my chapter, and also the aims, starting basically from the aims of the chapter. And then that will hopefully enable me to provide a few hints at some of the insights of the chapter. Okay. So just I have a very short PowerPoint, just voluntarily. Only 4 slides. Just very briefly, elements of context. Of course, we are talking about, in the chapter, I look at workers' collectives in the suburbs of Beijing, and how this workers' collective kind of, we could say, NGO is working on both providing services to migrant worker, local services, local community services, various forms of such services, but at the same time engaged in a number of organization of cultural practices, both again at the local level, but also at a larger level. I'll come back to that. And the context, of course, is a context of the post-Mao era, which from the Mao era, which was a decommodified labor system, to commodified, the commodification of labor and the diversification of labor regimes. And of course, there is this double movement. On the one hand, a broad movement towards the end of the state-owned masters of the country, the workers of state-owned enterprise, and before that had started another movement towards the creation, the making of a new working class, of course, with a great diversity within this working class. And then, of course, along with these changes, one should highlight the centrality of the notion of youth. I mean, if we think of the transformation in terms of totalitarian regime towards an authoritarian regime, and the issue of sovereignty going towards, if we use like Michel Foucault's framework, towards more maybe discipline and governmentality, but always with complex relations within the poles of this triangle. I think we can refer to what Borge Bakken calls utopia of quality and perfectibility, and concomitant trends towards development of talents and fostering values such as self-determination, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, adaptation, and so on. And here I'd like to, of course, maybe quote de Kloot and Jeroen de Kloot and Fay's argument in their very good volume, Youth Culture in China, in which they argue that youth aspirations and desire articulate in complex ways and unstable ways with normative power and with narrative tropes of openness, flexibility, and self-development. And of course, there is these youth cultures, they go on arguing, are informed by different and sometimes overlapping ethics of nationalism, individualism, socialism, and capitalism. And that's I think, an interesting framework which runs through my chapter. And when we think about youth among rural workers, migrant workers, first of all, the collective I've been looking at is, even though it's not only made of youth, but youth are probably the majority in this collective. But more importantly, I would like to stress the centrality of the category of youth and using specific terms, actually. Yeah? I think there is a great intertextuality within the categories that are being used, categories of expression, categories written, in written mediation, but also in other kinds of mediation. For instance, the centrality of Qingchun, which we find in migrant workers' description of how they live, how they experience toiling in factories or just living in cities on their own. But of course, Qingchun is a term that I'm sure many of you have come across in your work, and I know it's very, very central, for instance, in songs, among various categories of youth in China. And then, of course, I would like to stress also the fact that youth can be thought as a kind of reservoir of social energy, which can be shaped and tapped in and invested into, of course, economic development and prosperity, and a project of national development. So there is here, and probably, of course, that in this respect, looking at migrant workers from the countryside, with this issue of urban-rural dimension in the identification of these youth, and also youth, migrant rural youth, as being objects of pedagogical talks and narratives from the elites, but also from their families, for instance. And again, I'd like to strengthen the very pervasive uses of highly recurrent series of terms. I'm thinking, of course, here in such as Qingchun, Fengxian Qingchun, offer your youth to realize ideals. So there is something with aspirations. Today in Xi Jinping's China, we talked about national dream, or the Chinese dream. The idea of dream was actually very, very, very pervasive in narratives within the cultural politics of being represented and self-representation of rural workers. So now I'd like to turn basically to the aims of the chapter, and I will highlight a number of brief theoretical consideration, but at the same time I will also try to highlight in the, let's say now, 7 minutes left, more or less. Basically, what I'm doing in this chapter is looking at how, on the ground of course, other literature that I've looked at the representation of migrant workers, but there hasn't been that much work looking at how grassroots collectives of workers mediate workers' experiences. And in mediation here, I skip to the third slide. Basically, mediation, which are seen, or arrangements of mediation, which are seen as being enabling to bridge meaning with organizations and people. Meaning, organizations, institutions, organizational practices, and people's biographies, and so on. So that's what I'm trying to do. And doing this, I'm using a framework from Susana Bleil, which she used for landless peasants in Brazil, by exploring how these collectives actually engage in the constitution of mediation arrangements, complex mediation of arrangements, both face-to-face encounters, uh, organizations of spaces of interactions, of engagement, forums, classes, but also online discussions, small scale events, but also larger scale events. So there's a really interesting way of looking at how these spaces of interactions and engagement actually relate to each other and how they participate to a politics of voice and to making visible the collective's actions, their claims, but also workers' identity. So, right, that's one thing. Then the other thing I'd like to stress is basically that I'm not so much interested at what spaces really migrant groups are investing, but rather at a range of organizational practices and mediation processes through which spaces of interactions and engagements are being created. And of course, there is a centrality here of the issue of culture and cultural performances, basically. The idea being that through performances, there is the possibility to maybe change social orders. There is at least on the part of the, let's say, the founding members of these organizations, there is a strong sense of trust in the capacity of culture to along with other material practices to change, to transform social relations somehow. And of course, in the paper, I try to show how the organization has grown by looking at genealogy, has grown in its organizational capacity, but also in its ideational capacity. It's in its values and how this relates to participants in the activities of the organization. Right, and then among also I conceive of cultural practices in the paper as embodied practices, and within this I focus maybe mostly on cultural practices as carrying the potential to foster pleasure and connect people and embody emotions as well. I'd like just to quote here just two brief quote. I look at how much time I still have.
You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. Let me just quote two quotes, and then I'll finish with one final remark. Right, so basically here's a quote from a young worker, two workers, one male, one female, and they are talking about a large-scale event, which is the Migrant Workers Springs Festival Gala. And this is what they say. These quotes are from October 2017. Fieldwork I did in Shenzhen. So one young male worker says, participating to this gala was really like a dream. It was a dream, really. Our group was not even formed yet, and we got selected for our own song on our daily life in the factory. It was like a dream. We were so proud. And then the second quote by a female worker, we were both thrilled at the idea of participating and scared also. But we were so delighted, so happy. My fellow sisters overcame these hurdles when they took part to the gala. And also this was the first time that we loved our bodies, that we experienced a kind of liberation of our bodies. In fact, we were full of expectations. It was the first time that so many female workers would shout, and the term here is nahan, their voice and feelings. Right, so I'll finish with one concluding remark, which is basically getting back to the idea of space. Because when we think of mediation of spaces, of mediation of people's experiences, and the issue of visibility, actually we touch upon a very interesting feature of public space in China, I think. Basically, this is the idea that spaces of mediation have to be struggled for. They are always unstable. There is a struggle and a subtle play here by the protagonist creating this space, a play within around the borders and the very frontiers between more or less institutionalized, formal, informal, more or less visible or not, authorized sites of public expression and association. And I think what is interesting within these processes is how the protagonists are extraordinarily well aware of this kind of politics of visibility. What kinds of actions and what types of political socialization can take place within these space and how visible can they become? Yeah, and this of course raises the issue of the publicness of the space and of the more or less highly constrained nature, depending on, of course, on the topics being discussed and also the conjuncture. All right, so this is a complex issue, and I've just hinted at it. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Eric. Now we will listen to the last presentation by Lisa Richaud from the ULB.
Thank you, Flora. So I want to start by thanking Vanessa for inviting me to join the GENEsYs project, even though I'm no specialist of China's youth cultures in the first place. But Gwenelle and Vanessa initially kindly invited me to join in their book project by way of providing a conclusive chapter. And this was mainly based on my own interest in objects like cultural performances, sociality, or public spaces. So rather than presenting a singular case study as my colleagues did, what I want to do today is just share with you some of the reflections that emerged as I was working on that conclusive chapter. And even though I ended up touching up on a number of aspects, what I mainly want to present today is what is being developed toward the end of in the last part of that conclusion. And if time allows, I will also touch upon some of the direction that had emerged since. So as the title of my talk makes clear, I want to dwell upon one particular aspect in relation to the practices examined in the book, and that aspect is their affective tonalities. So you might recognize the way I'm phrasing my topic today as somehow fashionable, let's say, because the affective turn has been everywhere in the social sciences for the last 2 decades. But its pervasiveness, however, is not that much reflected in the book, at least in the book's overarching framing, even though some authors, and we had a good example with Eric's presentation on communities of emotions, do touch upon issues of affectivity and emotion. And I have in mind, apart from Eric's chapter, Elisabeth Brunner's study of environmental protest in Chengdu, where she talks about the affectiveness of images being circulated in virtual spaces, or Jingsi Christina Wu's chapter on hip-hop contests, and I will come back to that. So what I want to do today is take perhaps a bit more explicit stance and think with China scholars who before me have emphasized the value of thinking with affect and emotion when it comes to China, and I have in mind Yang Tie or Teresa Kwan, for instance. Perhaps a quick note on the terminology, since I've been using affect and emotions interchangeably. Although there is a quarter in the literature with Brian Masumi as the main representative, who has emphasized the distinction between those two concepts. So affect is generally associated with, let's say, the visceral, the non-representational, the precognitive, and emotion is generally deemed to be more discursive, so the way we represent or talk about our bodily experience, our affective experience. So we want to recognize, of course, that there might be a gap between what we feel and the way we express these feelings, But we can also side with historians and anthropologists of emotions who have emphasized how the very ways in which we express and represent our bodily experience also influence and shape that very experience. So for the sake of caution, I will side with thinkers such as Sarah Ahmed and Sian Nai, who rather than stress the difference and distinction between affect and emotion, consider that it's more a matter of degree. It's a difference of degree rather than a difference of nature, and thus we might use the terms interchangeably. So why bring the affective back in when considering the volumes chapter? So two main reasons. One was that reading through the very heterogeneous material that is being presented in the volume, we find that positive affects recur in relation to what youth do in the collective spaces being described. And I began to think that this positivity, this positive affectivity, might be critical to the very way we discuss the political dimension of the practices under scrutiny, and we saw with the various presentations that ideas around the political implications recur in the analysis being proposed, and is sometimes very directly taken up through notions such as resistance, for example. So essentially my question for today is this one. What does the positive affectivity of the many practices examined in the book do to our analysis of the political potential of the practices broadly construed? And how can we elaborate on this seeming, let's say, erasure of the negative that seems to be taking place in quarters of China's public cultures and youth culture in particular? So I want to provide very quick examples from the chapters, and I won't have time to go through each example, of course, but each chapters, of course, but maybe key examples to show you what I mean by this recurrent positive affectivity. I start with the chapter by Tingsu Christina Wu on hip-hop online contest. So she shows how hip-hop has moved from, let's say, underground circles to a more mainstream culture, and through that very process, audience have increasing demands for rappers to kind of embody sort of a positive, sunny, forward-looking attitudes. So I quote directly from her material, a fan expressing herself on an online forum. As times evolve, hip-hop is shedding its old shadow and starting to reveal a sunny and energetic side, energetic side, which is the ready made of hip-hop. And Christina Wu herself comments, whereas rappers may build their artistic expression on hardship and desperation, their ultimate meaning and inspiration stems from notions of strength, resilience, and hope. Another example is that of Eric Florence, who presented just, and he cited the quotation that I wanted to share with you from that female participant who emphasized the happiness and pleasure of joining the New Year Gala, even though in the first place ideas were about expressing the hardship of their everyday lives. But the sense of happiness that emerged out of the participation in cultural performances is also key to understanding what this participation means to these young migrant workers. Final example, Steen de Klerk chapter, who couldn't be here today, I guess. He describes how some LGBTQ groups wish to engage society at large through singing performances, and again, the emphasis is on the sharing of fun, playfulness as the key mode through which to engage society. So, reading through these different examples, we can also, of course, consider the, let's say, grassroots aspects of it. This affective process as grassroots process, but it's hard not to think about how the Chinese state over the past 2 decades has put very much effort to promote this happiness, positivity, resilience, and so on, or 正能量, so positive energy being a key slogan today, and encourage Chinese citizens to embody this happiness, to produce, to perform really the positive affects. And I like one of expression that is being reused by Derek Hurd in his chapter on 正能量 positive energy, to smile oneself happy, so to produce happiness through embodying small gestures in everyday life that may produce that very feelings, even though the citizen might not exactly feel that way in the first place. So we have, of course, very thorough analysis of this trend in Yang-Tie's work on laid-off workers, so not very related to youth culture, and more recently also, as I said, through Derek Hurd's work on positive energy and public discourses around positive energy. But one key thing is that through those discourses and promotion of positivity, the very causes of unhappiness is never addressed by the Chinese state. So one objection perhaps is that this might not be simply an echo of, let's say, China's emotional authoritarianism, to borrow a term by Pun Nai and Jack Chiu, and can rather be looked at as some kind of, let's say, global politics of happiness. Compare, for example, Stine de Klerk's material on LGBT activists in China with the ethnography by Linda Johnston and Gordon Waite, in an article published in Urban Studies called Play, Protest and Pride, Unhappy Queers of Prouder Play in Auckland, New Zealand. So what they show is that often they also build on other queer theorists who show how queer groups are seldom are very much encouraged to party and play but not to protest. And they write that the display of happy queers in public space might be part of what Sarah Ahmed might call moral order within urban spaces that silence dissent in the pursuit of a good capitalist city. So this is for the comparative aspects of it. Also, I want to bring another nuance in a different vein, that we might also object that the very positive feelings embodied that by, let's say, migrant workers or queers might not exactly coincide with the state version of happiness. And also that they might produce very different effects in the lives of those performing them than what the state might expect. Final nuance that these different positive affects that I'm kind of conflating together, so fun, playfulness, happiness, optimism, hope, etc., might be of various nature and should be treated with greater analytic caution than I'm doing here. However, I think that it is still safe to claim that all this kind of participates in a general erasure of the negative in public culture, even, of course, that we should recognize this process as being never completely achieved. So this is what I wanted to stress, the general mood of events that seems to be increasingly difficult to disrupt through the performance of the embodiment of the negative. And feelings of unhappiness and their cause, again, and I think Eric's case was a good one in that respect, remain largely unaddressed, even though these occasions provide welcome release for participants. And this is where I wanted to bring back this idea of how positive affectivity might inflect the political potential of the practices being looked at. So let us return to Stine de Klerk's analysis of LGBTQ's activism, where he states, for example, that collectives with a focus on fun incorporate visions for social change. So for him, there is a slow revolution, and I quote, slow revolution is the term he uses, that is afoot through playfulness. And I instead wonder how revolutionary such a slow revolution might be when state-promoted positivity is somehow echoed through these performances and dismiss the possibility to stage socio-politically induced dysphoria. And this is a genuine question and not a rhetoric one, and I want to be clear on this. I have in mind Michael Warner's reflection in his famous article "Publics and Counterpublics," where he discusses what makes a counterpublic counter. So in distinction to what Nancy Fraser writes, for example, he does not see a counterpublic counter because of some discursive or positional content, but because of the affective style, the aesthetic style being performed. So what can we think about what we might have found looking, for example, at song culture, for example, the emerging song culture in China that embodying dispiritment and depression. Could we imagine that the embodiment of negative effects in the context of aggressive promotion of the positive might create a different politics of presence and might bring more disruptive senses of the possible? These reflections are directly inspired by a body of work in anthropology and cultural studies that have recently highlighted the role of negative effects as a productive ground for transformative agency. I have in mind the work, of course, by Sian Nai and Svektovic, who emphasized negative effects as a diagnostic tool. Diagnostic tool. So I suppose I might be running out of time, but 2 minutes, perfect. So let me just say that after writing that conclusive chapter, I began thinking more and more about this issue of where to locate negative effects in China's public culture and what we could say about its political potential. So I gathered a group of scholars, and unfortunately the workshop was cancelled because of the pandemic. But we are currently putting together a special section for the journal How Ethnographic Theory on this politics of negative effects. And well, it should be out in December 2001, and you'll be able to find out what a group of brilliant scholars read about the politics of trouble, indifference, shame, deflation in various contexts, and particularly in practices shared by the youth. And I stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa, for your presentation. Now we will start the discussion followed by the Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can write them down on the YouTube chat box. And now I will welcome Valeria Zanier from KU Leuven for the discussion.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. And first of all, I want to thank Vanessa and Gwenel for having invited me to join the group in this panel. The teaching semester just ended, and it is indeed very refreshing to immediately jump into lively research activities. I also want to thank all the colleagues of EAST and of ULB. Using the web, every distance can be covered. But indeed, from Leuven to Brussels is only 30 minutes by train, so we should do it more often. So I enjoyed reading each of your papers for many reasons, because they focus on the young people. And as an academic, I'm constantly in contact with the young generation, as most of you. They are all digital natives, and they indeed live in the media. And maybe less than their Chinese peers, but still. So it is crucial to get into their camp and to look at the world using their tools, their eyes. And I was pleasantly reassured by reading the findings of research projects that address the Chinese youth as if they were young people living in an average society, technology savvy, but at the same time also fragile and insecure, self-centered and withdrawn, and at the same time profoundly consumers. Contemporary China inevitably poses questions of excessive control, censorship. In the West, China is ever more felt as a menace because authoritarianism is accompanied by a rising economic power. This perception permeates also our research and our lives as scholars of contemporary China. Today, for once, we set aside these tough problems and we rediscover a crisp and natural fascination in the Chinese culture, in the capacity of the young to create appealing images of China. And I think that this is really what usually lacks in the actual image that China projects abroad. And I also think that Lisa's suggestions to have a more rounded, a more in-depth conception of the more negative affects is of course welcome, and it is fruitful for a more profound research on the topic. Yet I also think that the study of the positive affects and of all this positivity somehow deserves to be done also for the sake of itself. And so many of the papers deal with the young people in the cyberspace, Initially, these incursions evoked in me adventures set in a possible future. Well, you know, explorations of Mars are now becoming fashionable, and even China's Zhurong rover has landed on the red planet. But it soon became apparent that mostly young people use the cyberspace to jump into the past. Well, at least an idealized past, uh, colored with nostalgia. So this juxtaposition of extreme future and extreme past evoked both harmony and tensions. Tensions between what germinates naturally in the minds of young people, their dreams for the future, and what is inculcated and permitted by the political leadership. Tension inherent in the evolution of the Chinese society, who benefited, who did not, which expectations do the young people feel for their future. Tensions between rural and urban China, the educated and the uneducated, those who have a possibility to fulfill their dreams and those who just strive to survive. Yet again, the occasions to find harmony in this chaotic present are there in front of the Chinese youth, even if only for a few minutes each morning to exchange calligraphy exercises via a friendly smartphone. So I will now just formulate some comments slash questions for the presenters, and they may, I mean, you may capture them and just answer, or just keep them for yourselves. Okay, I hope there is enough time to listen and to interact with each of you. So first of all, to Seyo, your chapter on barrage subtitle presents a fascinating picture to me, because I had always seen this, but I had not been, knowledgeable of the fact that someone is really studying the Danmu. And so there is a great need of sociability in your paper. And or a video, I mean, this need is felt more pressing than knowing the meaning of a song or a video. And this resonates with me a lot with the image of young people. It made me think whether there are emotions and feelings involved in it. Is there also, if we look at the text, is there a need to escape loneliness? Loneliness is indeed a big issue in modern Chinese cities, and often young people are there on their own or to study or to work, and they lack the necessary social support. So I was curious to know if you were able to find any sign of melancholy, sadness while conducting your research, or maybe not. And to Jeroen and Laura, yes, that's a very interesting chapter that you presented. Especially, I find the link to Taiwan and Hong Kong as places of purity and simple life really really striking, if you think, because these are actually the places that achieved modernity much earlier than the People's Republic of China. But I can say also in my personal experience that this is the fact. I was living on a long research research leave in Taiwan for a few months, a few years ago, and it was really great to see how many buses of Chinese people from the mainland would actually visit Taiwan in order to really have a sample of what is the Chinese tradition in the temples and how it used to be. So yeah, and by the way, but while I was there, I even participated in some of calligraphy classes that were given in the afternoon, evening to a small group of people by people selling antiquities in their shops during the day. So it was really interesting to see that now this has become fashionable for children and for young adults in the mainland. And one technique, of course, one overarching way of teaching and training is copying from the old masters. Different styles correspond to different personalities and different moods. And it was very interesting to see how the young Chinese are actually able to consume what they prefer of these according to the mood that they have in the day. But overall, I could read that calligraphy should be about providing calmness and capacity to reflect. So, do you think that young people look towards these masters as possible models for their future selves? Uh, do they look towards them in search for more certainties for their future? Is there anything that they see that it fascinates them behind? I mean, besides learning the calligraphy and thinking about going back to tradition. Um, for Gwenaël, well, it was a big trip, indeed, to travel with your paper to cyberspace, and yeah, what I gathered from the presentation of the 20th Xiaoshuo is that yeah, first of all, there is a great power given to imagination, that readers and writers maybe are also in search for some kind of harmony, for some. It struck me really that mostly they look for China's glorious imperial past, and also they strive in these collective literary projects to change the history of the history that predates Qing decline and the imperialist spoliation. Uh, so that's what I was thinking about. Maybe they look for ways to restore harmony to the course of Chinese history. Do they see this as something important, relevant in their projects? Um, and yeah, it's interesting that this project starts with a consumer-oriented way. So at first I was a bit taken back, like literature by commission. And but then it actually results in a very collaborative way of producing and consuming literature. So it really revived my interest with it. And it is fictitious. These are communities that exist in the cyberspace. They don't meet in real life. Well, at least maybe we don't know. And so mostly what happens there, it stays in people's minds and in people's virtual spaces. But we also well aware that this imagination is really powerful, and the projections can create image, and these can become engines to propel change. So I was wondering, is there any sign that the young generation of millennials might become less nationalist or maybe more nationalist than what even hoped by the current leadership? And just one curiosity, you mentioned the place of Mao's iconography, although Mao's years are, yeah, for sure not one of the best places where these readers would like to find themselves, but the use of Mao's iconography just captures my interest. So if you could say something more, yeah. And when let's come to Eric's paper. And yeah, I think that the paper of Eric really goes to the core of one of these tensions that I identified. And really this is the tension between urban and rural, and also between those young people that have a dream and can think and fantasize, and those that have to deal with very basic problems with survival. And so it gets back to this problem in China, that there are two different Chinas still. And when we talk about poverty, we always go back to poverty related to the people living in the rural areas, or the migrants that from the rural areas go to the city. And somehow the urban poverty is also, I mean, those that are in the urban areas, but they're not well off, they just fall completely out of the radar. So this is something that it may not be related to your paper, but it's one of the things that I'm thinking about. But these youth, I mean, you speak mostly about the spaces and the communities, especially about this case that is really enlightening. And and of course, the way in which the migrants come together and they learn about themselves, to speak about themselves, to mediate their image and their experiences in real spaces with real people is very interested. But I was thinking about 2 points. Uh, First, do they also share cyberspaces? Is there anything of these activities that is also taking place in cyberspaces, and do they share the same spaces as their urban peers? So is there any interaction or at all? Are there young migrants that maybe take as model those cultural young people that our colleagues Laura and Jeroen have mentioned? Is it something that they can even fantasize about? I mean, to make such a big trip? And are the young migrants visible to their young urban peers? I mean, I take that from your paper that you question about the visibility right by the end. I mean, of your elaboration. So it may not be one of the points that you have worked too much about, but I think that already these mediations and these communities do a lot to make the migrants visible to themselves, and that's already a very first step. But and then Adam Yat Chow, he in his paper, urban youth are visible to the rural youth as an example, as something that they want to get closer. But is the opposite real also? Does it happen? Well, as I said, I mean, this can just be seen as a suggestions for the future. And last, Lisa, well, I think that your chapter is very, very full already with discussion threads, and really goes to the core of the critical points that can be found in the book. And you know the book and the chapters and the participants and also the topic much better than me. So, but I just want to say, I do think that it is needed. I mean, that your chapter, your final considerations are very needed for the progress of the research that was presented here today and in the book. And I also capture the suggestion to go behind, I mean, to look behind what is there, very positive, very smiling reality that we have. So using the tool of, I mean, the suggestion of negative affects. What I just have one suggestion for you. So is there a space, even if imaginative, even if virtual, in which these different kind of communities, I mean, these different kind of affects meet? I'm thinking of the youth in Hong Kong and the protests that they organize, and this has been going on already for some years. Of course, well, due to China's peculiar situation, it is difficult for the people to actually meet, and there is a control, a censorship about everything that goes even remotely touching these issues in Hong Kong, in the mainland. But somehow these are the young people that are pushed by negative affects. And I don't, and but they also are part of this generation that is very much into light emotions, being joyous and laughing. So they're part of the same generation. Do they talk to one to the other? Do they see each other? Yeah. And well, I hope I stayed in the times, because the idea was to have some comments and then propel the discussion. So please, Flora.
Thank
what do you
you,
say?
Valeria. I think we will give the floor to the presenters. Seyo, maybe if you want to start quickly.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So yeah, very quickly, so about the loneliness, and definitely, I think I didn't go into detail, but as in Uero and also the chapter on these people who this the like a Wei or like Shao Qinxin. So people who kind of, escape from the pressure, everyday competitiveness, and find some sort of, maybe not escape, but find happiness in detailed expression of fashion. So I think, yeah, that aspect is there, and maybe it's kind of like a digital, very much of a cyberspace version of what Zero and Yero and is talking this chapter is talking about. So that's one. And about like emotion, and I think also relates to Lisa's presentation today, but I think that issue of emotion, kind of negative, positive, would be very interesting thing to explore. And my example came from more like a kind of happy anime fans who basically all like anime. So I more less focus on this happy emotion, less conflictive interactions. But definitely, as I look further into maybe videos that has more like a nationalistic orientation, like a different interpretation of history. So there are sometimes embarrassed and really kind of negative affect, like a competition and conflictual interaction. So definitely, kind of maybe looking into this negative effect might be interesting. And one just last point would be, then maybe as Valeria mentioned, there may be some sort of potential in these cyberspaces, seemingly kind of mundane interaction to kind of mediate between this negative and like a positive. And one example would be one interesting video I found was kind of translingual interaction, presenting on one like a particular anime work that has been a little bit controversial because of like a historical reason. But participation is seemingly from different areas of Chinese language speaking societies, and also Japanese, Korean. They somehow kind of present. Of course, it's not like a fully coherent interaction, but this space provide like opportunity for different opinions of people to gather and at least kind of interact, and maybe if not like a reconcile everything. So again, this kind of issue might be interesting thing to explore. Yeah, so that would be my response. Okay.
Thank you, Seyo. Maybe now Laura and Jeroen, if you want to answer.
Yes, thanks. Let me quickly engage. Thanks a lot for these comments. It's wonderful. Okay, let me quickly engage on the Taiwan and Hong Kong. It's actually not Hong Kong, but really Taiwan that serves as the kind of imaginary around this cultured youth. And it's partly it's not just a tradition. I think what interests me also is actually also this sort of simple life, which is not connected to tradition as much as it is to say the Tainan sort of withdrawal from society. So it's, but part is tradition as well. That's true. But I think the around this hipster culture is really the simplicity that's attractive. And then Laura, maybe about the masters.
Yes. So your question was on if these young people see the calligraphy masters as actual sort of stable figures to look up to. I think that's a very good point. And what I hadn't appreciated before doing the research is how this idea that your moral character is reflected or mirrored in the written character is not just figurative or not just a metaphor, but is actually sort of seen as the truth. So everybody I spoke to really sort of conveyed that yes, if you look at somebody's characters, you can see how their character is on the inside, and this is not. So how strong that belief is, I hadn't appreciated before, and I've learned that through the research. So yes, they're looking at, for example, if you feel uncertain, you're going to write, for example, Yan Jinqing's calligraphy, or if you feel a bit more brave, you're going to do Huaisu's crazy calligraphy. And this is actually how people talk about these masters as living people who can guide you through feelings and emotions. Yeah.
Gwenaël, do you want to answer?
Yeah, thank you very much for Valeria for your inspiring comments. Just to try to answer in one global answer to your questions. As for the past, I mean the travel to the past, there are quite different reasons to explain that trend. First one is maybe political one, because it's quite hard to imagine travel into Chinese future that could even a little bit deviate from the official conception of the Chinese future. But as you said, it's also definitely to be linked with a kind of nostalgic desire for a period where China was more prosperous. But it and also at the age of a big change. Actually, it's also makes me think on Jin Yong's novels, the wuxia novels, whose stories often take place during periods of transition when China was going to change, when the government were falling, and you need the Jianghu's characters to restore in some way a Chinese harmony and sense of honor and so on. So I think that we also have the same kind of trend or feeling in Chinese cyber literature, and also a more naive passion for history, probably. And as for this aspect of individual and collective projects, I think that what is interesting is that in cyber literature sphere, there is at the same time the will to participate in creation. I mean, to be more implied in creation, but also we often think that, okay, cyberspace is the sphere in the word of the highlighting of the individual, of the self, and so on. But most of the time, people are using pen names or avatars. So it's kind of um, make uh, oneself participate into a kind of process, but not always as a way of pushing uh, ourselves to make a name and so on. And maybe just a last word about the mouse iconography. It's also kind of fugu, probably, or nostalgic to this kind of collective efforts to make history. And it fits quite well with the project of the time travelers of the series. And it's the big paradox of this kind of triangular fiction, as you say. Maybe there are like more nationalistic than the government hope them to be. But at the same time, this kind of over nationalistic feeling is subversive or is threatening um, the official and the unique conception of history. And that's probably why China is not very well welcome anymore in Chinese cyber literature.
Thank you, Gwenaël, for your answer. Eric Florence.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much, Valeria, for the comments and the questions, and also Lisa. I'll briefly react to both of your comments, but very briefly. I think the issue of to whom are the people who have been looking at visible, and via the practices that they have been fostering over the years is an very interesting question. And I think it's got to do with how issues are being turned public. So it's true. I think it's part of the missions and the goals of such organizations to actually try to visibilize some social issues and contribute with many other actors to turning them into public issues. But at the same time, when you look over the years from the 90s, the early 90s, when rural workers started to participate to written mediation of their experience through literature, popular literature, for instance, which was very quickly co-opted by the party state cultural authorities. They took some literary heroes and turned them into icons. And then, but then at that time, basically that literature was just a thing of migrant workers for themselves, among themselves, or maybe a few literature specialists, but that was all. What I've been focusing on is much more, I think, cross-class and cross-generation. And there are many bridges between different cultural practices. So particularly in the field of singing, for instance, music, there are lots of overlaps between what these people do and other bands do. They represent themselves in the same kind of spaces. But certainly there is less and less possibilities for large-scale visibilization of the more negative or the critical dimension. I mean, that is inherent in these narratives and in these cultural performances. That's for sure, and I addressed that issue at the end of my paper. But also in the very collective I've been looking at, interestingly, it had an incredible longevity. I mean, more than 15 years, and also interactions, lots of interactions with students, with scholars, with various sorts of people from different classes. So that's I think my very brief reply. But then to Lisa, I would just like to take a very short time. I won't be too long. Lisa, I think that's a very, yeah, I really found a lot of food in your discussion. And I think there is a difficult balance to strike for many of these, especially the publicness of expressions of mediation. I think there's a difficult balance to strike between some kind of hope or framing of hope for the future. And of course, Tamara Jaka and others have written about this. And voicing a politics of embodied dignity and claims for social justice. And this, of course, depends very much on the degree of visibility, the scales of spaces of mediation. So the form of mediation, for instance, written mediation, I could see that it took a very formal way of kind of hegemony of forms, actually. They were very, very conscious that they were taking part to a kind of frame narrative. But then these questions that you raise very interesting methodological questions and difficulties, because on the one hand, we don't want to dispossess people of their agency. On the other hand, we want to avoid the tropes, the narrative tropes, which articulate with more hegemonic narratives. And I think it's very difficult, but one way maybe to do that is to restore the complexity of subjectivities. And the only way to do that is through probably observation, long ethnographic fieldwork, and show how basically agency must be based on a complex understanding and multi-layer understanding of subjectivity. Yeah, thank you. That's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lisa, do you want to answer?
Yeah. Before I go back to Valeria's questions, maybe I rebound on what Eric just said. You make me think, Eric, perhaps this romanticization of negative effects that I'm not calling for, but what I said might echo that kind of idea, is very delicate in the case of migrant workers, especially because these ideas around this, as you said, these tropes around bitterness, indignity, etc., are often assigned. And I read a recent article by Cara Wallis where she described performances set up by NGOs where female domestic workers have to perform tears, etc., negative, and it's not a very much, let's say, emancipatory politics of the negative effect. So yes, we need to be very nuanced, of course, and there's a strong need for more ethnography and long-term observation of the making of subjectivities. And to Valeria's comments, if I get you correctly, I think it's more about this ambivalence when you talk about the meeting of the negative and the positive. If you can bear the weight until December 2021, when the House special section will be out, there will be very interesting papers by Barclay Bram, Shoemaker, and Sum Chun-Yi on different topic, but Barclay touches upon therapeutic groups, so the psycho boom going on in China at the moment, with groups of young people meeting and discussing their negative effects, but again, with the idea of not disrupting emotional flows and redirecting these negative effects toward more positive attitudes. And so of course this is a very different image of the, let's say, politically motivated youth that you mentioned in reference to the Hong Kong protests. But another example is Sum Chun-Yi's chapter in the forthcoming special section, where she'll be analyzing groups university students groups carrying on morning activities in relation to the Wang Yue's case. So Wang Yue was that little girl that was hidden by a car and no passers-by stopped to help her. And the students are redirecting this idea of being assigned, this idea of being indifferent by the party state and the recent promotion of Lei Feng character, and they're reappropriating this idea of indifference in very interesting ways. So that would be where the negative and the positive might meet. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Lisa. I see that there are no questions in the chat box. If somebody want to ask a last question here in the room or among the presenters? Okay, so if there is no question, I think we can have the coffee break, 15 minutes, and then we will come back for the second session. Thank you to all the presenters and the participants.
Okay. Bonjour. Tout d'abord, nous s'excusons pour notre retard. Nous avons eu un panne technique tout à l'heure. Maintenant, nous allons commencer la session 2 en français de la conférence finale GENEsYs. Donc, cette session se penche sur le dialogue autour des jeunesse espace public en Chine et en Thaïlande. Nous avons 12 intervenantes et 2 discutantes. Donc, nous allons d'abord commencer par Nolwenn Salmon de l'Université Jean Moulin Lyon 3. Elle va parler de stratégie de mise en visibilité d'une éco-communauté des jeunes chinois. Nolwenn, vous êtes prête pour présenter vos recherches?
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Oui.
Parfait. Alors, je vais partager mon PowerPoint. Ça fonctionne. Est-ce que vous voyez mon PowerPoint?
Oui.
Tu peux le mettre en plein écran, s'il te plaît?
Ah, bon, voilà. Ça va maintenant.
Oui. Donc bonjour tout le monde, merci de me donner la possibilité donc, de présenter un petit peu mes recherches. Donc avant de rentrer dans le détail de ma présentation, je voudrais tout d'abord commencer par remercier toute l'équipe du projet GENEsYs et plus particulièrement Vanessa Franville qui m'a chaleureusement accueillie à Bruxelles et qui m'a permis de me lancer dans cette nouvelle recherche et de me rendre donc sur le terrain fin 2018. Donc, ce dont je vais vous parler aujourd'hui, c'est donc la stratégie de mise en visibilité d'une éco-communauté de jeunes néo-ruraux chinois. Alors, les éco-communautés, comme les éco-villages, recouvrent des réalités variées, mais ces diverses initiatives se rejoignent notamment autour de 2 dimensions principales que l'on retrouve également du coup dans la définition de ces éco-villages ou de ces éco-communautés qui varient un peu de l'une à l'autre. Donc, tout d'abord, il y a la mise en avant de l'importance, évidemment, du soin porté à l'environnement et à la minimisation de l'impact négatif donc, du village sur l'environnement naturel. Donc, en mettant en avant, par exemple, des techniques agricoles biologiques, des constructions écologiques, une meilleure gestion des déchets. Ça, c'est le premier axe. Le deuxième axe qui est également important de noter, c'est que ces éco-villages et ces éco-communautés insistent sur l'importance du soin porté aux liens entre les êtres, donc notamment entre les êtres humains, mais aussi avec les animaux ou avec les plantes. La constitution d'éco-villages ou d'éco-communautés s'est multipliée en Chine ces dernières années. On a notamment des initiatives de la part du gouvernement chinois qui cherchent à redynamiser les campagnes et qui donc multiplient les programmes de développement ruraux dans les 2 dernières décennies. Et c'est dans cette perspective qu'il a officiellement annoncé en 2006 la volonté de développer des éco-villages. Cependant, dans ce type d'initiative, le projet s'inscrit dans un processus de décision top-down et porte donc essentiellement attention aux objectifs de développement et de revitalisation économique. Ça ne correspond pas exactement à toutes les dimensions qu'on a l'habitude de mettre en avant dans les éco-villages. En 2012, le ministère de la Protection environnementale chinois comptabilisait environ 8000 éco-villages planifiés par l'État. Donc, c'est quand même de très fortes. Par contre, si on s'intéresse aux éco-communautés chinoises d'initiatives locales et spontanées, là, elles sont très peu nombreuses en Chine. Il y a un site qui s'appelle Global Eco-Village Network qui répertorie donc les initiatives dans le monde et qui en comptabilise 10 pour la Chine, mais en réalité, plusieurs de ces communautés sont moribondes. Beaucoup ont des difficultés à pérenniser leur existence du fait du manque de personnes prêtes à vivre et à s'impliquer dans la durée dans ces projets. Pourtant, on pourrait penser que les récentes évolutions de la société chinoise donnent la possibilité de contribuer, de faire augmenter l'attrait de ces communautés, que la société chinoise va dans une direction qui pourrait renforcer cette dynamique. Donc, je pense par exemple évidemment à la forte préoccupation pour l'environnement, pour l'écologie, mais aussi l'attention croissante portée à la qualité environnementale du lieu de vie comme de la nourriture. Parallèlement, il y a un exode rural qui est certes dominant, mais on voit apparaître à la marge un mouvement de retour à la campagne qui concerne notamment une population jeune et éduquée à la recherche d'une meilleure qualité de vie pour soi et ou éventuellement pour sa famille, notamment lorsqu'il y a de jeunes enfants. Si la dimension environnementale est très importante dans ce type de démarche, c'est aussi la question du style de vie qui est en jeu. On voit une insistance sur la volonté de s'extraire d'un rythme de travail effréné, d'une compétition sociale oppressante. Donc, c'est la volonté d'essayer de se reconnecter à soi, à la nature, à une temporalité différente. C'est pour ça qu'on parle souvent de lifestyle migration, donc des migrations de style de vie, pour décrire ce type de mouvement. L'attractivité croissante de cette vie à la campagne est perceptible sur les réseaux sociaux. Vous avez dû entendre parler des chaînes de vlogueurs ou de vlogueuses, plus exactement, pour la plus connue, puisqu'on a la célèbre Li Ziqi qui attire des millions de vues. On est sur Weibo à 27,5 millions et sur YouTube à 15,3 millions d'abonnés. C'est quand même énorme. Et puis, il y a toute une constellation d'autres blogueurs moins connus qui diffusent également des vidéos sur le retour à la campagne. C'est souvent un retour à la terre idéalisé et désincarné qui est rêvé par les citadins sous pression et qui rend du coup l'épreuve de la réalité difficile. Donc, lorsque l'échappatoire passe de l'imaginaire, de la vidéo au réel, les désillusions sont souvent grandes. Et c'est ce qui explique en partie donc la non-congruence entre un retour à la terre de plus en plus tendance et attractif et des éco-communautés qui peinent à avoir un nombre de résidents croissant, voire même constant. Donc, je vais commencer par vous présenter un peu plus la communauté dans laquelle j'ai effectué mon terrain avant d'expliquer plus en profondeur sa stratégie de mise en visibilité et ses conséquences ambiguës. Donc, présentation géographique rapide. Du coup, la communauté dans laquelle j'ai fait mon terrain a été créée en 2015 dans le Fujian. Donc, si vous ne situez pas, j'ai mis de petites cartes. Et donc, les membres parlent de cette communauté comme d'une communauté intentionnelle, donc Gongshi en chinois. Qu'est-ce à dire? Une communauté intentionnelle, c'est l'idée donc qu'on a des personnes qui partagent des objectifs communs, qui décident de vivre en communauté pour mettre en pratique leurs objectifs et qui, en général, donc, font le choix d'un mode de vie et de travail alternatif. Donc, dans ce cas présent, la communauté à laquelle je m'intéresse cherche l'autosuffisance. Donc, il y a un accent très fort porté sur l'autonomie matérielle, mais aussi l'autonomie intellectuelle. Il y a par ailleurs une mise en avant du commun, de la collectivité, avec par exemple la prise de décision collective par consensus, lorsque les décisions concernent la communauté. Mais en même temps, il y a la volonté aussi de se présenter comme un lieu où chacun peut essayer de mener la vie qu'elle ou il a envie de mener comme il ou elle l'entend. Cette communauté est une petite communauté. On tourne en général autour d'une dizaine ou d'une quinzaine de membres permanents et de volontaires. Et donc, il s'adonne à diverses activités, donc agriculture, artisanat, éco-construction, mais aussi éducation, musique, art. S'ils sont actuellement peu nombreux, ils ont un projet assez ambitieux de développement. Hein. Là, je vous mets une photo issue d'une exposition qu'ils ont créée sur place. Et on voit du coup leur projet d'expansion qui est chiffré avec aussi des tranches d'âge qui sont données. Donc, on voit l'importance de la jeunesse, puisqu'on a pour la classe 18-30 ans, on prévoit 40% de la population de cette communauté qui est cette tranche d'âge. Donc, c'est très important. 15% pour les moins de 18 ans également. Et donc, dans leur projet initial, la communauté devait avoir les 30 habitants d'ici fin 2020, donc on n'y était pas, et passer à 150 fin 2030 pour arriver à 300 en 2036. Donc, il y a vraiment la volonté de constituer un village qui, pour l'instant, vraiment peine à advenir. Et donc, c'est pour ça que la communauté va compter sur les stratégies d'accroissement de la visibilité dans le but d'attirer davantage de résidents. Donc, ce n'est pas forcément le seul enjeu, mais c'est celui qui va nous intéresser aujourd'hui. Donc, je passe du coup à mon deuxième point, la question de se rendre visible. Donc, je vais en parler en deux temps. Une première sous-partie concerne la question de se faire connaître par les médias et les réseaux sociaux. Et ensuite, je parlerai de l'accueil dans cette communauté. Donc, dans cette communauté, il y a particulièrement certains membres, particulièrement, qui portent une attention particulière à la communication sur le projet. J'ai du brouillage sonore, je ne sais pas si... Continue. Donc, du coup, il y a notamment deux témoins qui vont passer beaucoup de temps à s'occuper de la question de la communication. Alors, ça va recouvrir différentes initiatives. Alors, tout d'abord, il va y avoir des entretiens, des interviews, hein, donc beaucoup de médias nationaux et internationaux sont venus faire des interviews donc, des membres de cette communauté. Alors, je vais vous en citer quelques-uns. Bon, là, je vous ai mis une photo d'une interview filmée du South China Morning Post. Il y a également CCTV qui est venu, The Paper, la télé du Runan, une télé japonaise, une télé hongkongaise, The New York Times, le Spiegel, Six Stones, etc. Donc, on a vraiment une grande variété de médias qui se sont intéressés à cette communauté et qui ont permis de donner une image, du coup, en Chine, mais également à l'international. L'autre élément important, c'est également la production de contenu qu'ils produisent eux-mêmes et qu'ils donc mettent en ligne pour se faire connaître et tenir informés les personnes qui les suivent. Donc, le plus important de ces canaux, ce sont les groupes WeChat, plusieurs groupes WeChat en fonction des groupes internes, des groupes externes, des groupes pour les internationaux. Donc là où ils tiennent vraiment un fil suivi de ce qui se passe. Mais il y a aussi un site internet qui présente la communauté, les membres, les valeurs de cette communauté, et un autre site qui insiste sur le projet plus global, un projet qui inclut donc la constitution de cette communauté et qui va répertorier les informations sur la médiatisation de la communauté, donc que ce soit les articles, les interviews, les vidéos. Il est intéressant de savoir qu'il y a aussi une volonté de toucher donc, le public international avec la création d'un Facebook, cette communauté. Et ce Facebook est très peu suivi, hein, on a une trentaine d'abonnés, donc ça influence pour l'instant. Et récemment, on a eu aussi la volonté d'entrer plus dans l'intérieur de la communauté en mettant en avant une émission de podcast, en créant une émission de podcast qui est sur la plateforme Himalaya, mais aussi sur la plateforme Apple. Donc, ça reste en mandarin, donc ce n'est pas forcément accessible à tout le monde, mais il y a quand même du coup, une plus grande visibilité qui est donnée à ce podcast, qui donne un espace plus grand pour les membres de la communauté pour s'exprimer sur leur communauté, leur parcours, mais aussi donc, pour parler après de figures ou d'autres initiatives qui vous ce podcast donc, qui est récent, qui a été lancé en 2021, on a pour la première série, le premier épisode donc, qui parlait de ce que c'est que les communautés intentionnelles. On a eu à peu près 900 écoutes. Pas énormissime, mais voilà, il y a quand même un certain intérêt pour cette question. Par contre, si on s'intéresse aux éco-communautés chinoises d'initiative, l'un de ses membres va également participer occasionnellement à des événements en ligne comme des interviews et des conférences pour partager son expérience et sa philosophie de vie, faire connaître son parcours, ses projets et aussi sa communauté. Donc, il a participé, par exemple, à un concours, on pourrait dire un prix, le Young Champions of the Earth, donc un prix organisé par le Programme environnemental des Nations Unies pour, alors, sans doute essayer de gagner le prix, hein, y avoir une petite somme d'argent en aide, mais également pour du coup importante et une reconnaissance. Cette personne a également développé un compte Twitter qui lui sert surtout relayer des informations sur la communauté. On est à peu près à une soixantaine d'abonnés, donc ce n'est pas énorme là non plus. Mais voilà, il y a cette recherche qui n'est pas très nourrie non plus sur Twitter. Donc, on voit l'intérêt porté au fait de toucher une audience internationale et de s'intégrer à un réseau international d'éco-communautés. D'ailleurs, cette communauté se présente également sur des sites anglophones qui ont pour but de répertorier les différentes initiatives de ce type. Donc, je pense par exemple à Global Village Network, Foundation for Intentional Community ou UNIDO. Il y a plein de choses à dire, mais je vais pas développer davantage sur ce. Ce qu'on peut voir, c'est que le concept de capital de visibilité qui est développé par Nathalie Heinrich peut être utile dans ce cas pour penser l'importance de cette communication à l'heure où le visuel exerce un rôle de plus en plus puissant dans l'espace public. Le deuxième point sur lequel je voulais parler, donc dans cette sous-partie sur la visibilité, c'est le fait de rendre visible de manière plus proche, accueillir et impliquer les personnes intéressées par ce type d'initiative. Donc, l'idée, c'est... Alors, j'ai une petite point sur le Champions of the Earth. Et donc, l'idée pour faire venir les personnes extérieures, c'est de créer des événements pour inviter ceux qui sont spectateurs, qui regardent les vidéos, à dépasser ou à délaisser les écrans. Donc l'idée, c'est d'ouvrir les espaces, les lieux de vie au regard des visiteurs, mais aussi donc de dépasser la question du visuel pour engager tous les sens. L'idée de rendre sensible un autre mode de vie, de rendre possible l'expérience d'immersion dans un autre univers. Il s'agit alors non seulement de provoquer le passage de la visibilité à l'expérience, mais aussi celui du spectateur distant à l'acteur partie prenante, dans le but de créer une passerelle pour que le fossé existant entre les modes de vie citadins et ceux des membres de cette communauté apparaissent moins infranchissables, que l'altérité semble moins radicale et les frontières plus poreuses. Donc, pour attirer du coup des personnes, je vais vous parler de deux événements qui sont créés. Donc, le premier que vous voyez sur la gauche, c'est donc un festival qui a lieu chaque année. Donc, Poitiers ou Southern Life Festival. Donc, l'idée, c'est de créer l'événement pour inciter du coup à la venue des visiteurs, mais aussi pour canaliser ces visiteurs à un moment précis. Je reviendrai. Pour présenter la communauté, ses principes, son fonctionnement à un moment précis du calendrier. La deuxième initiative, c'est des cours d'éducation, notamment pour les enfants. Il y a très régulièrement des enfants qui viennent dans la communauté pour récolter, entendre du coup comment se passe le travail de la terre. Donc on voit ici la volonté d'éduquer, de sensibiliser par le faire, par la pratique, pour transformer la jeune génération et lui offrir aussi une pluralité de perspectives. Il y a un très fort accent sur la question de l'éducation, sur la question des jeunes enfants. Donc la mise en visibilité est donc une pratique qui permet de faire exister cette communauté, d'une part par sa présence médiatique et en ligne, mais d'autre part en accueillant, en faisant passer l'existence d'une existence visuelle à une existence plurielle et vécue, incarnée. Oui. Cette présence va donc jouer un rôle dans les transformations des représentations, des imaginaires, mais aussi des possibles. Donc, elle est une proposition en acte qui montre que d'autres manières de vivre sont possibles pour celles et ceux qui ne se retrouvent pas dans les modes de vie dominants. Elle peut aussi être comprise comme une invitation à bifurquer, à transformer radicalement son mode de vie. Et donc, je voulais terminer sur les conséquences ambiguës de cette stratégie de visibilité, puisque d'une part, donc, cette visibilité va créer les conditions de possibilité d'un essor de cette communauté, puisqu'elle va se faire connaître, elle va participer à la mise en valeur de ce choix de vie, mais d'autre part, on va avoir beaucoup de temps et de préoccupations portées à la communication, à l'accueil des résidents, et donc il va y avoir une difficulté à réguler le temps passé pour la communication et le temps qui est pris sur les tâches qui doivent être effectuées et pour lesquelles, en fait, ils ont déjà des difficultés à les effectuer puisqu'il manque de membres permanents. Donc, pour essayer que le remède ne soit pas également un poison, la communauté va chercher des manières de réguler ces visites, de diminuer leurs effets négatifs. C'est-à-dire diverses réflexions, je pourrais y revenir éventuellement dans la discussion. Donc, on peut conclure sur la recherche d'un difficile équilibre entre une volonté de gagner en visibilité et la nécessité de préserver des espaces, des moments et des questionnements à l'abri des regards. Voilà. Je vous remercie.
Merci Nolwenn. J'invite tout de suite Virginie Arantes, notre discutante, pour la présentation de Nolwenn. Virginie.
Okay. Merci beaucoup Nolwenn. On m'entend, c'est bon?
Dans cette communauté, il y a particulièrement
alors,
membres.
Merci Nolwenn d'avoir partagé ces détails de ton terrain avec nous. En effet, la littérature reste d'une manière globale, encore très confinée à l'analyse des effets de la politique nationale de revitalisation rurale menée par le Parti communiste chinois, et très peu d'études apportent des détails ethnographiques aussi précis sur la façon dont les jeunes chinois réinventent ou essayent de réinventer la campagne donc par le bas et pas par top-down. Donc ta recherche sur ces éco-communautés spontanée est de ce fait très importante, car elle apporte une nouvelle perspective sur les aspirations des jeunes et leurs imaginaires, ou même leurs attentes par rapport aux zones rurales. Évidemment, et tu l'as brièvement souligné, nous sommes de plus en plus assommés par des vidéos au caractère rustique chic, si je peux dire ça comme ça, via les médias sociaux en Chine, en particulier par des micro-célébrités telles que Li Ziyi, que tu viens de citer, donc qui est la plus célèbre youtubeuse chinoise et qui est par ailleurs de plus en plus contestée car accusée donc d'être devenue une machine de propagande pour le parti. Alors le succès de cette industrie de contenu rural, également symbolisé par la série populaire Back to the Field, donc c'est une émission de variété où l'on peut suivre des célébrités qui vivent plusieurs mois dans une ferme, donc dans des zones rurales assez reculées. Et donc ce genre de contenu est de plus en plus analysé. Donc cette armée croissante de vidéastes ruraux, qui est appelée aussi de GENEsYs ou self-media, est souvent analysée par sa représentation idyllique, donc du slow living, qui contraste fortement avec le style de vie urbain, tu l'as également brièvement expliqué, et donc qui attire des jeunes influencés par des idéaux environnementaux et qui sont donc lassés des effets négatifs de la pollution et de leur mode de vie dans les villes, etc. Donc l'impact énorme de ces GENEsYs et la façon dont ceux-ci deviennent des outils de promotion, de propagande du projet de revitalisation rurale intéresse des chercheurs. Han Li, par exemple, nous montre la façon dont ces nouveaux médias mettent en scène une esthétisation de la vie rurale pour des raisons économiques. En effet, donc ces vidéos mélangent la vie quotidienne avec donc des promotions de produits vendus par ces micro-blogueurs dans des sites d'e-commerce. Et donc, elle explique comment ce contenu renforce l'idée de l'entrepreneuriat individuel, de la réussite personnelle, du développement, et donc cette idée de développement économique des zones rurales. Et dernièrement, de la politique de l'État pour donc la revitalisation des zones rurales. Ton étude de cas, au contraire, représente une autre réalité et fait surgir de ce fait de nouvelles questions. J'en ai moi-même plusieurs, et donc je vais en poser plusieurs et n'hésite pas à répondre à celles que tu entends être opportunes. Donc je me demande par exemple dans quelle mesure, et tu as touché très brièvement sur ta présentation, cette production que je viens de décrire aide l'éco-communauté à intéresser un public plus large, ou si au contraire ces images presque utopiques du monde rural créent des frustrations insurmontables dès que ces personnes sont confrontées à la dureté d'une vie à la campagne et dès qu'ils arrivent à ces communautés. Donc, quelle stratégie développent-ils, s'ils en développent, pour préparer les visitants à cette réalité? Quel public essayent-ils de toucher via leur campagne de communication? Qui produit leurs vidéos? Est-ce qu'ils tentent de déconstruire cette image idyllique? Donc voilà, c'est une première question. Une deuxième question, et j'ai pu l'analyser moi-même à Shanghai via mes études donc, des ONG, où il y a de plus en plus, donc les ONG adoptent des mécanismes de marchandisation. Est-ce que donc développer des mécanismes, parce que j'ai lu un peu sur cette communauté donc, qui commence à faire payer des visites, à produire des artisanats, donc des produits artisanaux pour vendre. Alors, est-ce qu'ils ne risquent pas de tomber dans les mailles du discours de promotion du tourisme rural? Donc, justement, à retomber dans ces logiques qu'ils cherchent à fuir. Alors, une troisième question, comment ces communautés changent, ou est-ce qu'ils arrivent à changer la signification symbolique du terme rural? Donc alors que la plupart de la classe moyenne chinoise ou donc qui vivent dans les villes, a toujours une aspiration, même les migrants qui partent dans les villes, à partir en ville. Donc, donc vivre dans une ville qui reste actuellement encore une norme. Donc comment ces jeunes et leur capacité de quitter volontairement la ville et de s'installer à la campagne est vue par les autres, est vue par les personnes qui partent ou les personnes qui suivent leurs vidéos, etc. Est-ce que c'est vu comme un privilège? Je me demandais aussi si tu pouvais aller un peu plus loin sur le background des personnes qui sont établies dans ces communautés. Et puis maintenant, c'est en écoutant la présentation de Johan et c'est donc toute sa réflexion sur la culture hipster. Est-ce que ces communautés développent vraiment des mécanismes pour vivre ensemble ou est-ce que c'est plutôt une culture aussi hipster, un peu bobo, donc qui est centrée sur soi, sur une recherche de soi-même? Ou est-ce que ils tombent là-dedans ou est-ce que vraiment ils arrivent à créer des visions contre-hégémoniques par rapport à un style de vie antimatérialiste et donc est-ce que ça sert contre, je n'irai pas jusqu'à dire contre-pouvoir, mais à déconstruire toute la production sur la revitalisation des zones rurales par le parti et tous les autres micro-blogueurs que j'ai cités plus tôt. Donc voilà quelques questions, Nolan. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Tes questions et tes commentaires très pertinents. Combien de temps j'ai pour répondre à toutes ces questions fort riches? J'ai pas entendu, pardon. Je n'entends pas le...
Alors, vous avez 4 minutes pour répondre.
D'accord.
Ça va?
Okay. Je vais essayer de faire condenser. Alors, ce qui me paraît important de souligner, effectivement, c'est qu'il y a, avec toutes ces vidéos qui se multiplient sur Internet, il y a beaucoup de personnes qui vont venir dans la communauté en pensant qu'elles vont changer de vie et s'installer dans ce cadre idéal, un retour à la campagne, retour à soi, etc. Et en fait, ça génère effectivement une grande frustration à l'arrivée, puisque les vidéos montrent les côtés positifs de cette vie, mais qui sont évidemment désincarnés, c'est-à-dire la dureté du travail, la difficulté de l'effort physique, les conditions de vie très rustiques qui sont présentes, en fait, ne correspondent pas du tout aux aspirations de la plupart des personnes qui viennent peut-être du coup dans une démarche un peu hipster, pour venir faire des documentaires ou se reconnecter à soi, et qui du coup n'arrivent pas à rester. Et c'est pour ça que je parlais de cette difficulté à gérer les visiteurs. On a à peu près, disons, une quinzaine, ça dépend des moments de l'année, mais une quinzaine de personnes qui vont venir chaque mois pour visiter. Et donc, face à ça, il y a une volonté d'essayer de canaliser ces visites en faisant éventuellement payer l'entrée. Mais c'est sûr que ça fait tomber sur la question de comment éviter la question du tourisme rural. En réalité, ce sur quoi ils insistent, parce qu'évidemment, ce n'est pas une décision qui a été facile pour eux, la question de se dire de faire payer, c'est que la plupart du temps, en fait, les gens qui viennent sont un peu dans une démarche de tourisme rural. C'est-à-dire ils viennent pour voir, et en réalité, la plupart ne vient pas pour s'engager dans un projet plus consistant de vie. Et donc, pour eux, l'idée, c'est de diminuer donc ce flot de visiteurs, de les faire payer parce que de toute façon, c'est une démarche souvent touristique ou pas plus profonde, et que dans les cas où on est dans une situation de projet de vie, en fait, ils ne vont pas faire payer. Ils se réservent la possibilité de ne pas faire payer la personne, mais c'est pour limiter, parce que j'ai vu des groupes comme ça qui venaient par dizaines, en quart, pour venir voir et discuter avec la communauté. Donc, de toute façon, en fait, c'est un phénomène qui existe. Donc, le fait de payer, ça cherche à limiter un petit peu ce phénomène. Parce qu'en réalité, pour revenir sur la dernière question, il y a vraiment une recherche de vie collective. il y a une recherche du commun. Alors, dans cette recherche de la prise de décision commune, de la volonté de se transformer avec le contact des autres, est apparu aussi, hein, moi quand j'y étais, du coup, le retour un peu inverse, d'essayer de se donner des espaces personnels aussi, hein, d'essayer de garder un peu d'espace privé, parce que tout peut pas être, tous les temporalités, tous les espaces ne peuvent pas être communs, ou de plusieurs mois, plusieurs années, ça devient difficile. Donc, ce mouvement de chercher un espace privé, en fait, il s'ancre dans une volonté plus large de la communauté d'essayer de partager et de penser ensemble les choses.
Merci Nolwenn.
Merci, désolée, j'ai laissé plein de questions de côté, mais ça sera pour une prochaine fois.
Donc c'est maintenant midi 40, donc j'appelle tout de suite Edouard Delpe pour présenter ses recherches sur les musiques thaïlandaises.
Bonjour à tous et merci. D'abord un grand merci à toute l'équipe de GENESYS de m'inviter à cette conférence finale et un grand merci à Vanessa Franville et Pierre Petit de m'avoir permis de terminer à l'ULB cette recherche que j'ai commencée depuis de nombreuses années. Aujourd'hui, je vais vous présenter un peu l'objet de ma recherche en essayant de réfléchir un peu aux conséquences que peuvent avoir la circulation. Alors j'ai utilisé le terme publicisé dans le titre de ma présentation, mais le fait de rendre disponible à des publics distants des vidéos et des médias musicaux qui ne leur sont pas destinés. Et pour le cas que j'étudie, des médias musicaux venus de Thaïlande. Donc, on m'entend bien, c'est bon, ouais. Donc je travaille depuis 2013 sur un réseau qui distribue sur une scène musicale en Europe et en Amérique du Nord des médias musicaux issus de différentes régions du monde qui n'y ont jusqu'alors jamais été distribués, ou du moins jamais en dehors de leur diaspora respective. Je travaille plus particulièrement sur des maisons de disques, comme la maison de disques Sublime Frequencies, créée par Hicham Mayet et Alan Bishop aux États-Unis, et qui a édité plusieurs compilations de musique thaïlandaise. J'ai également travaillé sur la maison de disques Sutrengma Record à Bangkok, créée par DJ Mafsai, que l'on voit à gauche de l'écran, ou encore sur le collectif Seuil 48, collectif basé à Tokyo, qui réédite aussi de nombreux enregistrements thaïlandais. Ce qui m'intéresse est de comprendre comment ce réseau, composé d'éditeurs, de blogueurs, de DJ, investit un champ qui était jusqu'alors dévolu au domaine de l'ethnomusicologie et de la world music en renouvelant leurs problématiques. Donc, ce réseau est étroitement lié à une scène alternative aux ramifications diverses. Par exemple, Chris Menis, qui participe avec DJ Mafsai au projet Paradise Bangkok, s'est d'abord fait connaître pour avoir édité une compilation de musique sur un artiste de musique techno, Cibotron, qui a été publié chez BGP au début des années 2000. Alan Bishop, qui a créé la maison de disques Sublime Frequencies, est en fait le fondateur de Sun City Girls, qui est un groupe qui s'est fait connaître et qui est devenu un peu un groupe phare de la scène underground américaine du début des années 80. Et à ces différents acteurs qui rééditent des musiques thaïlandaises s'ajoutent d'autres acteurs avec lesquels ils sont en relation, mais qui n'éditent pas particulièrement des musiques thaïlandaises, comme par exemple Mark Hollander, à l'origine du groupe Aksak Maboul, et créateur de la maison de disques Crème Disque à Bruxelles, et notamment connu pour avoir réédité de nombreuses compilations de musique congolaise, comme celle du groupe Konono Premier, que l'on voit à droite. On pourrait également parler de Damon Albarn, derrière, membre du groupe Blur et de Gorillaz, qui travaille depuis les débuts des années 2000 avec la maison de disques Honest John Record, et qui collabore avec des musiciens maliens auprès de cette maison de disques, et qui aussi connaît tout à fait les travaux de, par exemple, DJ Mafsai, qui réalise de la musique thaïlandaise. Et enfin, on pourrait encore ajouter par exemple David Byrne, ancien membre des Talking Heads et créateur de la maison de disques Waka Bop à New York, qui depuis le début des années 2000 réédite des enregistrements notamment d'Amérique du Sud, d'Amérique latine, mais aussi de compositeurs nigérians comme William Wanyebor, que l'on voit ici à droite de l'écran. Donc, ce qui m'intéresse plus exactement est de comprendre comment ces différents acteurs font émerger de nouvelles catégories musicales à la croisée des musiques populaires et des musiques du monde qui retravaillent les dichotomies nord-sud, occident-orient. Pour mener ma recherche, j'ai donc privilégié un domaine éditorial particulier, celui qui concernait la Thaïlande, où j'avais déjà enquêté. Et je me suis donc intéressé aux enregistrements de genres musicaux très populaires dans le royaume, comme le luktung ou le molam, qui avaient en grande partie échappé au radar de l'ethnomusicologie et des musiques du monde, mais aussi à différentes catégories musicales inédites et propres à ce réseau, comme celle de musique thaï psychédélique ou de thaï funk. Et j'ai essayé de comprendre comment ces catégories pouvaient être perçues en Thaïlande. Dans sa totalité, mon terrain a été long et s'est étalé sur 2 ans avec de multiples coupures au cours desquelles j'ai pu suivre cette scène alternative à Bangkok, rencontrer différents producteurs, paroliers, chanteurs de musique luktung et de molam, mais aussi au cours duquel j'ai été moi-même mené à participer à différents processus éditoriaux au point de complètement quitter ma casquette d'étudiant en anthropologie. J'ai accueilli cette expérience comme une épreuve du feu, celle d'être affecté, comme le dit Jeanne Favre-Saada, par un matériau qui m'a complètement débordé, le rythme de la scène alternative n'étant pas du tout celui de la recherche. Donc, pour revenir à notre sujet, le réseau que j'observe est étroitement lié à l'émergence de l'Internet participatif, le Web 2.0, au début des années 2000, qui émerge au début des années 2000. Ce réseau est aussi donc lié aux possibilités de partage que l'Internet participatif met à disposition de ses usagers, raison pour laquelle cette nouvelle scène musicale reçoit sous la plume de différents auteurs le nom de World Music 2.0. Organisé par des internautes à la base et non par des institutions, ce réseau privilégie différents genres digitaux, c'est-à-dire différents fonctionnements et façons de naviguer sur le web pour découvrir et mettre en circulation de nouvelles musiques, et développe également ses propres épistémologies, c'est-à-dire ses propres façons de classer et d'organiser le régime d'abondance informationnelle que représente le big data. Or, à différents niveaux, ces genres digitaux et ces épistémologies provoquent des intersections problématiques. Donc, en se laissant naviguer de lien en lien à travers la barre de recommandation YouTube, c'est-à-dire en creusant un terrier de lapin, comme le disent les internautes anglo-saxons, certains acteurs de cette scène musicale parviennent à intercepter des médias musicaux au-delà des obstacles linguistiques et scripturaux que représente l'écriture thaïlandaise pour quelqu'un qui ne l'a pas apprise. Des médias qui n'étaient a priori pas destinés à être diffusés auprès d'un public à l'autre bout du monde. Tel est par exemple le cas de la vidéo des Kunarin, un groupe originaire de la région de Phetchabun au nord de la Thaïlande, qui est intercepté au fond d'un terrier de lapin YouTube par Richard Kamerman au début de l'année 2012, et qui est mise en circulation sur la bloosphère nord-américaine, jusqu'à tomber dans les mains d'un producteur américain qui en 2014 va venir enregistrer un premier album du groupe et puis qui ensuite va participer à organiser différentes tournées du groupe en Europe, en Australie et en Amérique du Nord. Donc j'aurais bien voulu vous présenter cette vidéo, mais en raison d'un problème technique, ce n'est pas possible. La vidéo en question est une vidéo qui est tournée par un des membres du groupe à l'occasion d'une cérémonie d'ordination monastique, c'est-à-dire un ngan boat, et en fait une vidéo destinée, on va dire, à une vidéo promotionnelle, mais d'abord destinée à une communauté extrêmement locale. La cérémonie d'ordination est en elle-même un moment au cours duquel un jeune homme quitte la vie séculaire pour aller rejoindre l'ordre monastique, et donc une cérémonie qui s'adresse d'abord à sa famille. Le jeune homme produit du mérite pour sa famille, le mérite étant une véritable valeur de l'économie religieuse bouddhiste en Thaïlande. Et c'est aussi une occasion pour la famille de produire, de faire une démonstration de sa générosité, et donc par là même d'asseoir son statut au sein de la communauté villageoise. Donc le fait que cette vidéo soit interceptée par un auditeur américain et mise en circulation au sein des réseaux de la World Music 2.0 pose donc des questions quant au fait d'étendre le public de cette vidéo à des auditeurs qui, a priori, ne font ni partie de la famille ni de la communauté villageoise. Ensuite, la vidéo, en tant qu'elle est partagée comme une musique psychédélique thaïlandaise, va susciter plusieurs désaccords entre internautes quant à l'identification du genre musical joué par le groupe. Alors, comme on n'a pas la vidéo, je vais essayer un peu de vous décrire cette musique. Quoi ? Bah, alors, je peux peut-être jouer sans le son, déjà, c'est un peu quelque chose. Et ouais, mais je crois qu'on la voit même pas. Mais bon, en fait, ce groupe de musique, en fait, est un groupe de processions qui accompagne des processions villageoises, donc comme celles qui ont lieu lors des ordinations monastiques, et qui est organisée autour d'un son de système de fabrication artisanale qui amplifie deux instruments, une basse et surtout un pin, c'est-à-dire un luth plutôt associé à la communauté Lao en Thaïlande, un luth à 3 cordes qui ressemble, de par ses sonorités, à une guitare électrique et qui est augmenté de différents effets comme de reverb ou de délai, et ce qui provoque au moment de la circulation de la vidéo dans les réseaux de la World Music 2.0 plusieurs interrogations sur l'origine musicale en fait de ce son. Donc je cite par exemple, voilà, je vais citer deux commentaires qui suivent la vidéo et qui interrogent justement son origine et montrent en quelque sorte un certain désaccord que la circulation de ce média provoque. Donc d'un côté, on a un internaute manifestement thaïlandais qui explique que il s'agit d'une musique traditionnelle thaïlandaise qui n'a rien à voir avec le psychédélisme. Donc la vidéo est partagée. En fait, le fait d'utiliser le terme psychédélique, moi j'en parle comme d'une épistémologie, en fait, ça permet véritablement de faire circuler, de capter cette vidéo, de la faire circuler sur différents blogs. Donc ce commentateur, Lucky Dessou, conteste en fait cette appellation psychédélique et explique que c'est une musique qui est très connue au nord-est de la Thaïlande. Il dit sud-est, mais en fait je pense qu'il se réfère au nord-est de la Thaïlande, et qu'elle se réfère à des contextes comme un mariage ou quelque chose lié à la religion, et il apporte l'information selon laquelle il s'agit d'une cérémonie d'ordination. À ce commentaire répond un autre commentateur qui dit que dire que c'est de la musique traditionnelle thaïlandaise Isan, c'est comme dire que le sanda est du kung-fu traditionnel chinois, c'est-à-dire que c'est à ses yeux complètement ridicule, et il insiste sur le fait que c'est une musique qui est clairement, fortement influencée par le rock psychédélique moderne. Donc ce genre de circulation et ce genre de médias interceptés dans le réseau que j'observe pose des questions sur l'origine culturelle de la globalisation de genres musicaux comme le rock, et donc pose des questions sur l'origine de genres musicaux comme la musique des Kunarines, en interrogeant s'agit-il d'une musique traditionnelle thaïlandaise sans connexion avec l'Occident ou d'une réappropriation locale d'un genre musical populaire de la contre-culture américaine des années 60. Donc, il n'existe aucune réponse évidente à ce sujet. à cette question. La musique des Kunarines repose en fait sur l'interprétation de thèmes musicaux relevant de la tradition lam ou molam, associés aux populations lao de Thaïlande, mais se passe aussi par la reprise de morceaux populaires en Thaïlande, dont certains venus d'Occident, comme par exemple Zombie des Cranberries, auquel le groupe fait explicitement référence dans une de ses vidéos. Leur musique implique aussi des emprunts plus tacites qui ne sont pas identifiés comme tels par les musiciens, comme les premières mesures du morceau Rasputin de Boney M, popularisé en Thaïlande au cours des années 70, ou encore l'introduction du morceau Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White du compositeur colombien Pérez Prado, vraisemblablement popularisé à travers les instrumentations préenregistrées sur les claviers électroniques diffusés en Thaïlande à partir des années 90. Donc ces différentes sections ces différents emprunts font l'objet de significations et de réattributions plus ou moins officielles qui les laissent percevoir comme authentiquement locales. Donc là, c'était voilà un exemple d'une reprise thaïlandaise de Rasputin, du morceau Rasputin de Boney M, qui date des années 70, donc un Rasputin rigluant, Rasputin Khao Niao. La vidéo ne marche pas, donc je ne pouvais pas pouvoir le diffuser. Et en fait, on trouve sur Internet des vidéos, par exemple, de commentateurs thaïlandais qui découvrent des groupes phalans, donc occidentaux, jouer le thème de Rasputin et qui interprètent ces moments musicaux comme le fait que des occidentaux en fait, jouent du molam, c'est-à-dire de la musique thaïlandaise. Donc c'est voilà, pour un peu spécifier le genre de réattribution. Donc voilà, ces réflexions peuvent être étendues à un autre niveau, au-delà du simple répertoire que joue le groupe de musique, que jouent les Kunarines, et dans le mouvement que j'observe, vient aussi questionner l'origine musicale du pin, c'est-à-dire du luth dont joue le groupe, que l'on voit ici donc, à gauche de l'écran, dans les mains d'un luthiste célèbre en Thaïlande qui s'appelle Tongsai Taptanon, et qui a participé à électrifier, amplifier ce luth en prenant comme modèle la guitare d'Elvis Presley, d'après ce qu'il m'en a dit, et qui en a fait l'instrument phare d'un groupe très célèbre en Thaïlande qui s'appelle Pet Pintong. Donc, dans mon étude, j'ai choisi de ne pas adopter une perspective strictement musicologique qui m'aurait permis de réattribuer ces musiques aux auteurs qui en seraient à l'origine, pour au contraire laisser apparaître comment la World Music 2.0 se nourrit de ces intersections problématiques pour faire émerger de nouveaux questionnements et alimenter une nouvelle scène musicale. Ce qui m'intéresse, c'est d'observer comment, par exemple, la question de l'imitation, du plagiat, de la reprise, plutôt que d'être tranchée, est au contraire utilisée par les éditeurs pour décentrer l'écoute et délocaliser à travers les oreilles de musiciens inconnus une référence musicale familière et produire une écoute expérimentale de musique populaire en Occident. Donc, au-delà du simple exemple des Kunarines, la reprise de Rasputin est en fait assez connue au sein de cette scène musicale, et de nombreuses compilations font paraître des reprises, comme par exemple la série de compilations Taibit à Gogo, qui fait paraître une reprise du thème de James Bond par le groupe Son of PM, qui est un groupe de musique shadow, c'est-à-dire une musique influencée par le rock qui émerge au début des années 70, ou encore une célèbre compilation mise au point réalisée par Mafsai, qui présente une reprise par l'artiste Luktung thaïlandais Swang Santi du morceau Iron Man des Black Sabbath. Alors, peut-être que je vous présente quand même un exemple. Je vais mettre le morceau de Son of PM qui est un peu représentatif du genre de reprise qui intéresse cette scène. Donc c'est le thème de James Bond et qui est augmenté de sections de tambour long de Klong Yao qui ont une métrique assez spécifique et qui rendent le morceau assez étonnant. Alors. Donc, je ne vais pas m'attarder plus longtemps. Je vais essayer d'aller... rapidement vers ma conclusion. Donc, depuis les années 70, la question de l'imitation, du plagiat, de la copie est la bête noire des grandes firmes industrielles internationales du disque et représente un véritable angle mort des relations musicales thaïlandaises, à l'origine d'une réforme de la législation de la propriété intellectuelle thaïlandaise concernant les œuvres audiovisuelles en 1978. La scène de la World Music 2.0 véritablement met à jour tout un répertoire qui a été, pour des questions de litige de droit d'auteur, écarté écarté en fait de l'écoute que pouvait en avoir un auditeur en Occident, vu qu'elle n'y était pas distribuée. David Novak, qui a écrit plusieurs articles à propos de la World Music 2.0, montre de son côté comment cet engouement pour les reprises sur la scène alternative nord-américaine, qui invite souvent l'amusement et laisse passer les genres musicaux réédités pour de simples parodies, pose des problématiques complexes de réappropriation. Je n'approfondirai pas directement cette question ici et je me contenterai de souligner que les reprises participent d'une stratégie éditoriale à plus long terme et que pour les éditeurs, l'enjeu n'est pas simplement de figer les musiques thaïlandaises dans les imaginaires comme de simples parodies, mais d'introduire de nouvelles références musicales qui, à leur tour, pourront faire l'objet de reprises sur la scène alternative. Alors, encore une fois, on n'a pas la vidéo, mais donc il y a plusieurs cas de morceaux qui ont été popularisés à travers les compilations et qui ont fait l'objet de reprises par des groupes américains, comme par exemple une version d'une chanson de la chanteuse Kwanchit Siprachan qui a été reprise par le groupe rock américain My Morning Jacket, qui en a changé les paroles et qui a ajouté des paroles anglaises. Et ce mouvement donne aussi naissance à différents groupes, donc, comme le Paradise Molam International Band, créé à Bangkok par DJ Mafsai, ou le groupe texan Krung Bean, qui revendique son influence de certains blocs qui diffusent de la musique thaïlandaise. Donc, très rapidement, pour conclure, je dirais que cette scène touche à différentes questions problématiques, délicates, comme celle du droit d'auteur ou de la réappropriation culturelle. Et elle y répond par son ambition plus ou moins affichée de refonder le domaine des musiques du monde dans la matrice de l'Internet participatif, en profitant des possibilités de partage que celui-ci met à disposition de ses usagers, de sorte à élargir la base de son public. Donc l'enjeu est d'observer un peu toutes les problématiques que ce mouvement produit et s'il arrive véritablement ou non à décentraliser les attentes de ses publics. Voilà.
Merci Edouard. Pour la discussion, je passe tout de suite la parole à Marie-Pierre Lissoir, chercheuse associée à l'IST. Marie-Pierre?
Oui, vous pouvez m'entendre?
Oui.
Ok, super. Merci beaucoup Edouard pour ta présentation. Je trouve que c'est un sujet absolument passionnant et très excitant. Si on a 10 secondes, moi je peux partager mon écran avec la vidéo de Kunait, si ça vous intéresse. Oui? Non? Un peu de musique quand même.
Oui, merci Marie-Pierre.
Hop, j'ai juste partagé mon écran 2 secondes. Voilà. On essaie 10 secondes, si ça marche pas, c'est pas grave. Voilà, c'était bien ça. Hein.
Ouais, merci.
Ok, donc je vais... il faut que j'arrête de partager mon écran. Voilà. Alors, peut-être un petit commentaire d'abord sur la vidéo. Moi, je travaille au Laos, pas en Thaïlande, et en plus, pas particulièrement sur la musique pop. Mais ça me fait penser au fait qu'ici, on voit vraiment que c'est en effet une vidéo qui n'est pas du tout destinée à un large public, mais plutôt vraiment aux proches. C'est ce genre de vidéo que les gens vont mettre en live maintenant sur Facebook. C'est assez courant. Et ça aussi au Laos, hein, les gens sont extrêmement connectés, y compris dans les campagnes, etc. Et donc, moi, je peux régulièrement suivre des nouvel an chez les Lantels dans le nord du Laos, par exemple, avec les chorégraphies des jeunes filles du village qui sont vraiment en streaming, en live sur Facebook, etc. Donc c'est ce genre de pratique qui est assez courante et vraiment intéressante en effet. Et on voit en effet que c'est décrit comme 2 heures de taille psychédélique. Il faut aussi ajouter que c'est pas en fait une musique qui est utilisée pour l'ordination, c'est pour le divertissement au moment d'une cérémonie d'ordination. On voyait aussi dans les images que c'est au moment où on va raser le jeune homme, et donc c'est pas encore vraiment dans le temple, etc. Donc c'est pas non plus de la musique d'ordination. Et donc voilà, là on part encore dans tous ces discours par rapport à l'interprétation de ce type d'événement. Je pense que tu as mis le doigt sur des sujets qui sont eux-mêmes des rabbit holes en eux-mêmes, qu'on pourrait creuser énormément. Je pense par exemple à ces notions de réseau, de réseau de diggers ou enfin d'amateurs de ce type de musique, entre autres aux États-Unis. Je pense que c'est intéressant de voir est-ce que ces gens se considèrent eux-mêmes comme une communauté, est-ce qu'ils ont des termes qui sont propres à la communauté, par exemple des termes tels que diggers, etc., qui sont plus utilisés vraiment entre eux. Et si eux-mêmes oui, se considèrent comme une communauté, à quel point est-ce qu'ils sont liés, communiquent, etc. Ça, je pense, c'est des sujets assez intéressants. Le côté aussi Internet participatif, les questions qui sont aussi très à la mode dans le monde anglo-saxon, entre autres, hein, mais d'appropriation culturelle, hein, qui est extrêmement débattue, entre autres aux États-Unis, au Canada, etc. Appropriation et aussi réappropriation avec un certain retour minime quand même, mais qui n'est pas inexistant en Thaïlande. Et puis, la barrière de la langue que tu as abordée au niveau de l'Internet participatif. Et en effet, je pense qu'on est tous tombés dans ces fameux rabbit holes sur YouTube. On clique sur une vidéo de, on va dire, musique japonaise, et puis on clique, et on arrive sur des vidéos avec des descriptions qui sont entièrement, les descriptions et le titre entièrement dans une langue que généralement on n'arrive pas à lire. Et donc ça ouvre, en effet, ça fait tomber un certain nombre de barrières, ça ouvre beaucoup de portes. Mais je me demandais aussi au niveau du sens des paroles, puisque le luktung, les molam, etc., ce sont des chants, hein, souvent qui ont des paroles assez grivoises, c'est le moins qu'on puisse dire. Et donc, évidemment, là, il y a quand même la barrière de la langue, et ça joue quand même un rôle important. Est-ce que finalement, on considère que les paroles n'ont pas d'importance? Et dans ce cas, ça rend l'écoute complètement différente. Et quand tu parlais du terme de world music 2.0, je pense que là, on est vraiment en plein dedans. Pour moi, la world music, c'est la musique du monde, du monde qui n'est pas le monde occidental dans ce cas-ci. Donc, du coup, ici, on est en plein dedans, on ne comprend pas les paroles, et finalement, est-ce que ça a de l'importance ou pas? Ça, tu pourras nous le dire. Et ce type de musique avec, en plus, quand on est dans le domaine de la citation ou de la reprise de musique occidentale, on va dire, on a affaire à un type de musique dont les auditeurs occidentaux ont quand même certains codes, les progressions harmoniques, les échelles, etc., qui sont assez connus. Et puis, ce petit côté, cette petite note d'exotisme, là, on est en plein dedans, puisqu'on ne comprend pas non plus les paroles. On a ce côté instrument qu'on ne connaît pas, des sons un peu différents, et puis se poudrer d'un peu de nostalgie, puisque on est quand même souvent dans des sons assez rétro. Je ne sais pas si tu as déjà entendu ce type de musique, mais avec des morceaux contemporains, je veux dire occidentaux contemporains, qui ont été repris, par exemple, ou réinterprétés en Thaïlande. Ce serait intéressant de voir le côté nostalgie aussi dans ce genre de communauté qui est, on est en plein aussi dans la communauté hipster avec le rétro et l'exotique. Donc là, c'est vraiment du pain béni. Et puis enfin, la question aussi, finalement, d'appropriation dans le sens du déséquilibre, je veux dire, un peu des pouvoirs, puisque on le voit par exemple les internautes qui discutent de est-ce que c'est du psychédélique, est-ce que c'est considéré comme traditionnel, etc. Ici, peut-être que Lucky Desi est thaïlandais de Thaïlande ou de la diaspora d'ailleurs thaï, par exemple aux États-Unis. Moi, j'ai beaucoup remarqué ça au Laos. Quand pour le musée dans lequel je travaillais, on postait des vidéos par exemple sur la musique considérée comme traditionnelle au Laos, Mong, donc un instrument le tiaplai dans ce cas-ci. On avait posté une vidéo et je faisais l'interview d'un jeune homme Hmong qui expliquait comment il utilise son instrument dans le cadre de sa vie courante. Et puis, j'ai eu des commentaires assez vénères de certains Hmong aux États-Unis qui disaient que non, c'est pas juste, c'est pas comme ça qu'on utilise cet instrument. Et donc, voilà, c'est intéressant de voir qu'on a la vision, puisque tout ça est très subjectif, un jeune homme Hmong au Laos, la diaspora Hmong qui a une vision extrêmement claire de ce que devrait être la culture Hmong et comment elle doit être représentée, que ce soit aux États-Unis ou au Laos. Et puis aussi le public qui n'est ni Hmong, ni du Laos, ni de Thaïlande, et qui va aussi donner sa propre interprétation. Je pense que c'est intéressant de voir ça, mais souvent, donc, on n'a pas tellement la voix des musiciens locaux et aussi des auditeurs, puisque clairement, on est dans une pratique communautaire, on le voit avec la vidéo de Kunnarin. On a finalement un déséquilibre dans l'échange et la visibilité au niveau des savoirs, de l'accès aussi à ces vidéos et au niveau des échanges qui peuvent être faits et qui là vont un peu plus dans le sens du débat par rapport à l'appropriation culturelle. Voilà. Est-ce que tu as envie d'un peu rebondir sur certaines choses si on a le temps?
Merci Marie-Pierre. Donc, vous pouvez répondre pendant 3-4 minutes, ça va?
Ok. Bon, je vais un peu rebondir sur tous les différents thèmes que tu as soulevés en apportant des précisions et peut-être certaines réflexions. Donc, oui, effectivement, donc je parle de réseau plutôt que de communauté, dans la mesure où oui, c'est des personnes qui se connaissent, qui adoptent chacun à leur propre égard se reconnaissent dans des catégories qui ne sont pas forcément les mêmes, c'est-à-dire que certains se reconnaissent comme des diggers, c'est-à-dire comme des découvreurs de disques, d'autres critiquent volontiers cette appellation, jugée un peu trop clinquante, et préfèrent être considérés comme des enthousiastes en anglais, des passionnés, des amateurs. Mais disons que toutes ces personnes se connaissent et se rencontrent autour avant tout du partage de la musique sur Internet, mais aussi dans différents lieux physiques comme à Bangkok, à l'occasion des événements créés notamment par DJ Mafsai. Donc effectivement, ça pose des questions au niveau de la réappropriation, de la circulation de ces musiques. Tu as parlé de la barrière de la langue. Je vais directement apporter des précisions à ce niveau-là. Donc, beaucoup d'éditeurs en fait assument totalement de ne pas du tout accorder d'importance aux paroles des musiques qui leur diffusent. Considérant qu'en fait ça n'apporte des fois aucune valeur au morceau en soi qui peut leur plaire d'un point de vue strictement formel. Et après, disons que la barrière de la langue, c'est aussi intéressant de l'observer parce que c'est pas qu'une barrière entre la Thaïlande et les auditeurs internationaux et l'étranger, c'est aussi une barrière qui est intérieure à la Thaïlande. Donc pour ce qui est de la musique Molam, par exemple associée à la communauté Lao de Thaïlande, c'est une musique en fait que beaucoup de Thaïs de Bangkok ne comprennent pas simplement parce qu'elle est en Lao et qui ne parlent pas Lao. Et c'est aussi une musique qui, comme tu dis, utilise beaucoup de plaisanteries, parfois grivoises, et qui lui valent d'être très fortement stigmatisée en Thaïlande. Et donc pour des éditeurs comme Mafsai à Bangkok, justement passer outre les paroles qui lui-même le choquent, c'est aussi une façon de diffuser cette musique auprès d'autres publics à Bangkok et de les mener à s'intéresser à un genre musical auquel ils n'accordent pas d'attention sinon. Voilà. Effectivement, donc c'est un chant qui s'inscrit véritablement dans celui des musiques du monde ou de l'ethnomusicologie, avec toutes les limites que ces termes comportent, comme tu l'as souligné. qui pose voilà, beaucoup de questions aussi au niveau de la, on va dire, la balance des pouvoirs et le fait qu'il s'agit avant tout d'une circulation de musique de Thaïlande vers l'Occident plutôt que l'inverse, même s'il s'intéresse à des musiques qui ont d'abord circulé de l'Occident vers la Thaïlande. Je dirais voilà, que l'apport qui est fait, c'est justement au domaine de la world music et de l'ethnomusicologie, c'est en fait d'ouvrir ces domaines à la question des musiques populaires qui ont été plus ou moins boudées par ces deux domaines. Et que voilà, la question c'est de savoir est-ce que finalement la réappropriation thaïlandaise vers l'Occident est-elle contrebalancée par le décloisonnement de domaines qui étaient concentrés dans des institutions et qui maintenant s'ouvrent à des musiques populaires qui ont été longtemps mises à l'écart de ces institutions. Voilà, il y aurait beaucoup à dire sur la question du déséquilibre et de l'absence de la parole des musiciens qui vient en fait bien après, une fois en fait que les musiciens aient accédé à une reconnaissance en Occident. Voilà, je ne peux pas trop préciser plus, je ne sais pas si ça est clair, mais je pense qu'on n'a pas trop de temps.
Merci Edouard. C'est maintenant 13h15.
Merci Marie-Pierre.
Peut-être les participants ont des questions pour Nolwenn et Edouard. Je vous invite donc d'écrire vos questions dans la rubrique conversation au chat sur Zoom. Et Edouard et Nolwenn peuvent vous répondre par email, par exemple. Et une petite annonce. Demain, on se retrouve à Newport, hors Belge, pour la seconde partie de notre conférence GENEsYs. Et merci beaucoup pour Nolwenn, Edouard, Marie-Pierre et Virginie. Voilà. Il y a plus de questions.
Ok.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Juste une question peut-être de la part de participants. Est-ce qu'il y a des messages? Je n'ai pas d'accès. Ah, ok. Donc, voilà. Merci beaucoup et à demain pour la deuxième partie de notre colloque GENEsYs.
Merci à toutes et à tous.
Merci.
Merci.
Merci.